Well, good evening, everyone. It's just after 7 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's meeting of the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee. My name is Councillor Cllr Garton, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and public, and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined the application. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of the Eastleigh Borough Council staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then do please let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. We actually have a traffic light system. When the light is amber, then they have 30 seconds remaining. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. Our Constitution states that speakers speaking for or against have equitable time. Now, I know probably many of you have not been to a local area committee, so what that actually means is if we have 18 speakers who speak for 3 minutes each, then that time is added together so that those speaking on the other side, for example, speaking in favour, will have the same amount of time, even though they may be fewer. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's Constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we take lightly or wish to do so, as I'm sure everyone here wants to see what the outcome is of the meeting this evening. We will be having a comfort break during the meeting, and the bar will be open for members of the public to purchase refreshments, but we will not be selling alcohol. Thank you very much. So, the first item on the agenda is apologies, and there aren't any apologies this evening as we have a full house. So item 2 is declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interests as they occur to you in the meeting. Item 3. We will now move to the minutes of the meeting on the 20th of November 2023, and I would like to sign the minutes of this meeting as correct and a true record. So can I have a proposer, please? Thank you. Cllr Corben, seconder. Cllr Gomer. All agreed? Thank you very much. Right, now we move on to item 4, which is public participation. And we do have someone who wishes to speak on a subject that is not on the agenda this evening. And we have Mrs. Margaret Billard. Margaret Billard, if you'd like to come to the microphone, please.
It actually is on the agenda, and it's the general update since I've seen it. As it's going to be called the Utility Bowl, we in Hampshire all know it as the Rose Bowl. All the signs will have to be changed. So would it be possible that it is changed to the Utility Rose Bowl? That's all I have to ask.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Billard, for your comments. Obviously, we're not in really control of what the Rose Bowl, Utility Bowl, or G is what they decide to call it. But obviously, Utility is the new label for our cricket grounds, and I'm sure many people will still continue to call it the Rose Bowl, as many of us still do, even when it's called something else. But thank you very much for your comment this evening. Right, so we'll now move to item 5, which is presentation on planning guidelines. And I invite Liz Harrison to give the presentation. Liz, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just a brief presentation on the issues to be taken into consideration when determining planning applications. Members, as you'll be aware, the proposals must be considered on planning grounds, and the committee must determine proposals in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In this area, the development plan is the adopted Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036 and the Hampshire Minerals Waste Plan. The application before you tonight is a full application, which means all matters are to be considered. Access, design, layout, scale, etc. Other relevant considerations when determining the application are documents such as the Council's supplementary planning documents, for example, quality places, trees and development and planning obligations. In addition, it's necessary to take on board the relevant government policy, including the National Planning Policy Framework and its presumption in favour of sustainable development. It's obviously a key material consideration, so just a few indications in relation to the NPPF. It sets out that applications should deliver sustainable development without delay. Council should be meeting housing needs and significantly boost delivery of housing, whilst also promoting growth of the economy, requiring high standard of design and preventing or mitigating any detrimental impacts. As I mentioned before, there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development that runs throughout the NPPF, and there are 3 elements to sustainability: economic, social and environmental, all of which need to be considered. Other material considerations include any relevant planning history or previous applications, similarly any appeal decisions or site-specific policies, as well as site-specific matters such as highways, residential amenity, ecology, trees, etc. We also need to take on board any consultation responses received and any third-party comments made, and where relevant, any current case law. Matters that can't be taken into consideration include moral, racial or religious views, issues such as property values, private views, breaches of covenant, as well as matters that are covered by other law or legislation, such as building regulations and environmental permits. Similarly, personal views cannot be taken into account, and nor can civil matters. So finally, with regard to the decision-making process, any decisions made contrary to a recommendation must be explained and minuted as part of the committee proceedings, with clear reasons given. There is an option to defer, which would to seek amendments or further information, and if this is taken, then the committee must indicate what this is for. Similarly, if further controls are sought, then these must also be set out and be reasonable in planning terms. The local planning authority is required to consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of conditions, which are then discharged or complied with. And they must be necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development permitted, enforceable, precise, and reasonable in all other respects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. So we will indeed move on to the planning application, item 6, which is for the Utility Bowl, Marshall Drive, West End, and I will ask Liz Harrison to present the report. Liz, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just before starting, I would obviously point out, in addition to the committee report, there is the published update paper, which has been available on the Council's website. As a starting point, before I get into describing the application before us tonight, I would just like to set out the Council's interest in the land, as that has been an issue that's been raised by some individuals. The application site is owned by Queen's College, Oxford, and the Council have a long leasehold interest in the site and in turn sublet the site. The Council is not the applicant and are not involved with the submission of the application, and therefore we are able to determine the planning application before us. Any matters arising in respect of ownership interests, should permission be granted, are separate matters outside the remit of planning control and should not be relevant to tonight's considerations. Right, now to explain the application before us. The site is the utility bowl, recently renamed, and the application site is as outlined in red on the plan in front of you. It includes the stadium and then some land around it to the northeast, the southeast and the west. Just to put it in context, I'm sure you're all fully aware of the site, but here's an aerial photograph showing the site, and as you can see, running east-west at the northern part of the photograph is Botley Road. And from Botley Road, the site takes the access off Marshall Drive. Sorry, I'm just getting a point up. The existing overflow car park entrance is also located off Botley Road, further east from Marshall Drive. To the west of the site, you have Telegraph Road running down, and to the southwest, you have Telegraph Woods. The southern end of the site, you have the existing Hampshire Wellbeing Centre, located next to the practice pitch. To the northeast of the site, attached to the stadium, you have the existing Hilton Hotel. So the proposals before you tonight involve a number of different aspects. So I intend to take each aspect in turn, set out the key issues, and then come to draw it all together at the end. So this is the proposed site layout. As you can see, in the northeast corner, we have the proposed new event day car park. This would be accessed off an improved access in the general location of the current access to the overflow car park, but widened and enlarged to be suitable for the size of the car park proposed. Then we have the new fan zone entrance at to the east of Marshall Drive, connecting with Botley Road. To the northeast of the Hilton Hotel, we have the proposed hotel. To the southeast of the site, we have the new pavilion, which is sited to overlook both the main pitch and the practice pitch. To the south of the stadium, we have the proposed care home. And to the west of the site, we have the residential development. And to the northeast of the stadium, we have the Wellbeing Centre. Now, taking each of these elements in turn, starting with the northeast corner. As I indicated, we've got the proposals for the car park with the new access in off Botley Road, as well as this visitor entrance fan zone coming in, which will be pedestrian access down as far as the roundabout. And then in addition, you have the hotel here, which is angled to reflect the line of the extent of the urban area within the local plan. So just now looking through some of the photographs I've taken of the site. So I'm looking at the top left, I'm looking at Botley Road. I'm looking west along Botley Road with the site to the left-hand side, and you can just about see the access in the centre of the photograph. Similarly, the top right-hand corner is Botley Road looking east, and again the access to the existing overflow car park is approximately in the centre of the photograph. Finally, the bottom photograph, I'm standing on Botley Road opposite the existing access, and you can see towards the stadium and the existing Hilton Hotel. So it's this access here that would be enlarged, and the car park would be formed in the land between this access and the existing hotel. As you can see, I'm now within the site, looking the top two photographs looking towards the stadium, and then on the top right-hand side looking also towards the existing properties on Botley Road, which are situated between Marshall Drive and the existing overflow car park access. As you can see in the bottom photographs, as the land rises up as you come in off Botley Road. It currently forms part of the golf course, and so it will need to be remodelled in order to level off the ground to make appropriate provision for the car park. So back on Botley Road, looking at photographs of the visitor entrance, the fan zone. As you can see, the existing access on Marshall Drive and Botley Road is well supplemented by existing trees and vegetation. And it's some of this vegetation that would be lost and is referred to within the committee report. So the top left-hand photograph taken from Botley Road. Top right-hand photograph, I'm within the site. I've got my back towards, so I'm facing Botley Road with my back towards the rest of the site. And again, those are the trees that wrap round and as you take the road off to the right towards the hotel. The bottom photograph, I'm standing next to the hotel and stadium, looking towards the roundabout with the David Lloyd access. And again, the fan zone would come in through from the right-hand side, level with Marshall Drive. Then taking a similar look at the site for the hotel, you can just see the top photographs, where the existing hotel is sited, and the hotel that's proposed would come out and into this area in front of you that currently forms part of the golf course. So it would stretch out and into further towards Botley Road than the existing development. The bottom left-hand photograph, that's taken when I'm standing in the golf course car park, looking towards Marshall Drive in the far distance, and you can see the form of the existing hotel, because that's also mentioned in the report, and the proposed hotel would be on the other side of the access, heading out towards Botley Road. Similarly, the bottom right-hand photograph, I'm facing in the opposite direction, so the existing hotel car park is on the left-hand side of the photograph. So now some visuals in relation to this element of the proposal. This is a visual that has been prepared by the applicant. I would draw your attention to this potential retail unit that's shown here. Whilst there is an indication as to where it could go on the plans, there are no details of there. There's no elevations, no plans have been submitted. So it's not considered to form part of the application before you. However, the plans do show the pedestrian, segregated pedestrian walkway through from Botley Road to the hotel access road, level with Marshall Drive. Similarly, here's an indication of the hotel. As I indicated before, you've got the existing hotel, Hilton Hotel, and then it would come out from that at an angled formation. And in this visual, you're looking southwest from the northeast corner of the site. So you've got your back towards Botley Road. So taking these elements of the proposal, the key issues for the car park, visitor entrance and hotel are the impact of the car park on the countryside and settlement gap. As I indicated, the angled position of the hotel reflects the urban edge as identified in the local plan. So the development to the car park to the east is located outside of the urban edge and within the countryside and settlement gap. Therefore, the impact of that element of the car park and the car park in general on the countryside and the settlement gap is something to be considered tonight. In addition, with regards to the visitor entrance, you'll have seen in the report that it does, and also the creation of the enlarged access on Botley Road, they do result in the impact on trees, with the loss of a number of existing trees, and obviously the implications that has for ecological benefits on site. Another key element, obviously, with regard to the new vehicular access is the highway safety, and you'll see before you that the County Council are not content that they currently have enough information to conclude that it could safely accommodate the traffic as required. And then finally, another issue that's set out in the report is the siting and design of the hotel. It is within the urban area, so it would be acceptable in principle, but there are concerns about the relationship between the existing hotel and its quite striking curved form and the design of the hotel where it meets it in what would be quite an important area of public realm and sort of welcome vantage point. So those are key issues that need to be taken on consideration when determining the application tonight. Now, just moving round in a clockwise direction, so we move on to the pavilion that's proposed. As I indicated, it's sited so that it would provide views towards both the main pitch and the practice pitch. And it's relatively small in scale in nature in comparison to the existing stands there, but it does provide a pavilion on the top floor, also changing facilities, and then at the ground floor in improved maintenance and storage facilities for the cricket ground. So just some photographs. You may be a little bit less familiar with this part of the site. So on the top left-hand one, so on the left-hand photograph, I'm standing adjacent to the practice pitch. The stadium is on my right, and the trees in the background are telegraph woods. So I'm looking west when I'm taking it, and it would be up here on this, above this existing concrete area here that the new pavilion is proposed. You can just about see the current maintenance access underneath that would be altered as part of the proposals. The one on the right-hand side, the stadium is now on my left, the practice pitch is on my right, and I've got my back towards towards telegraph woods. So I'm looking generally in an easterly direction. And so for information as to what this will be proposed, this is the view, as you can see, just with the existing pavilion on the left-hand side. This is the view from the practice pitch. So you can see it's a two-storey element, but still comes in lower than the existing pavilion. Has the enhanced maintenance and storage facilities on the ground floor, and then changing rooms and pavilion facilities above. So for this element of the scheme, it's within the existing stadium grounds. So the key issues are the siting and design of it, and also the visual impact when seen from the wider view. As indicated in the committee report, there is a public right-of-way that runs to the south of the site, so views would be gained from outside of the site, not just from within. Then moving further clockwise round, you've got the care home. You can just about see at the top right, you've still got the pavilion, so you can see that relationship there. So this building here is the existing Hampshire Wellbeing Centre. So the care home is proposed in this curved formation to address both the existing internal road that runs around the stadium, and then also towards the car parking and practice pitch. It was initially intended to keep the monkey puzzle tree, if anyone is aware of that, on site, and it was partly designed to wrap around that and maintain it, but it's considered that it would probably not, it would probably be, excuse me, it would probably not be the best approach to maintain the monkey tree puzzle in such close proximity to the building, and given the state of it, although any tree loss is obviously something to be considered, the tree officer is content that on this occasion the quality of the tree is such that they don't raise objection to the loss of the monkey puzzle tree in particular. I'll show you some photographs. Oh, sorry, just while we're here, the public right-of-way, as you're probably aware, does run along here, and then it leads into the paths that go through Telegraph Wood. But the public right-of-way heads in this direction and then wraps around the eastern side of the stadium and comes out at Botley Road at the existing overflow car park. So some photographs of the proposed care home site. So I'm standing with my back to the stadium, and the top left you can see, you can just about see in the distance the existing Hampshire Wellbeing Centre and their existing car park, and then the existing trees on the site, and then the site itself extending out to the east, where it would face onto this part of the stadium road. The bottom photographs, I'm standing a bit further along, so it would be to the east, to the right-hand side, which is actually the west of this line of trees here, on this site here. You can see that there's obviously quite a change in levels as it slopes up from the stadium site towards Telegraph Woods, and that is something that would need to be quite carefully considered with regards to the need for any retaining walls, and also the ability to provide suitable and accessible amenity space for the occupiers of the care home. So just some visuals here, looking in a similar position from where I took the photographs. This is a visual looking southwest towards the care home from adjacent to the stadium. And then the bottom one, whilst not coloured, I thought it would be useful to include. This is the view from the southern boundary of the site. So if you were on the public right-of-way, this is the sort of view. There is obviously some existing vegetation, so you wouldn't see all of it in at once, but it's an indication of the size and scale of the development that's being proposed here on the southern part of the site. And as you will have seen from the report, the care home is not within the urban edge, and therefore it isn't in accordance with the principle of policy WE4, which is the site-specific policy for the Ageas Bowl, which states that all residential development should be to the northwest of the stadium. Care home is considered to be a residential use and is outside of that particular area. Sorry, it is within the urban edge, but it's outside of the area identified for residential development. And therefore it's not considered to comply with the detailed requirements of policy WE4. And just one further slide which may show some useful, it's a little bit tricky to see, but hopefully on the big screen it indicates. So outlined in red, dotted line, is the proposed care home, and you can see the size and scale of that in relation to the stadium and the tented pavilion there. So the key issues for the care home, as I've just indicated, are the principle of development. It is within the urban edge, but it is not within the area identified for residential development under local plan policy WE4. The siting and design is obviously key, and you will see comments within the report about the concerns from the landscape officer with regard to the landscape and visual impact of the care home and the setting of telegraph woods and the public right-of-way in the surrounding countryside. So the siting, design and visual impact are key components. You'll also see comments in the report about the suitability of the noise impact assessment that was carried out with the application. Environment and Health have considered that the noise impact assessment is not sufficiently detailed to enable us to conclude that the occupiers of the proposed residential elements, so the care home and the residential dwellings and apartments, it's not considered that they've demonstrated there would not be an adverse impact on their residential amenities. Further works required in order to assess all of the activities that could take place on the site, not just cricket, which is where the noise levels have been taken from, but obviously, as members will be aware, there is the opportunity for concerts to take place, and that's a very different type of noise. So in order not to prejudice the stadium in terms of its sporting and events, it's felt that further information is needed so that we're not causing that conflict between proposed uses and the existing use of the utility bowl. So then we've wrapped further round and we're looking to the west of the stadium. And as you can see here, this is Telegraph Woods to the south of the residential area. These blocks here are the 4 apartment blocks that are proposed to the west of public open space, which would wrap around the stadium road. You've then got residential dwellings, generally in a perimeter block formation, apart from in this bottom corner here, where they do actually back onto this space here, which is also considered to be a public open space. And there's discussion about the concerns that would raise with regard to lack of natural surveillance. The existing neighbouring properties, which have been mentioned in the report and the comments, these ones here in Westgate Mews and Telegraph Heights. And the proposed footpath that's mentioned that would lead out to Telegraph Road would come out from this western end and wrap around the edge of the woodland and connecting to the existing informal paths and the existing gate on Telegraph Road. So just to run you through some photographs. So I've come up from the care home site and I'm travelling still in a clockwise direction, and you can just about see here in the background you can see the existing properties, neighbouring properties, and then you can see before you the area that is the current gravel car parks. So the top right, I'm actually standing at the first entrance in, and you can see Telegraph Woods on your right, and you can see it wraps round, and then there are the existing neighbouring properties. The bottom left, I'm stepped in slightly from the stadium road. You can see it running round to the right, and I'm looking further north into the site, and this will be where the public open space will be provided between the apartment blocks and the stadium road. As you can see in that bottom left-hand photograph, it currently ramps up, and I'm now standing on the top of the mound looking towards the general lower gravelled area. You will see from some sections I'll show you shortly that it is proposed to change the levels within this area. So the development wouldn't be contained within the gravel area. They would be, the levels would be changed and altered to take in the existing mound at the western edge of the site as well. Just a couple more photographs. So I'm on that mound, so I've got my back to the existing properties. Telegraph Woods is to my right, and you can just see the stadium in the distance. So this is the area that would be built on with the residential properties. And then this is another view slightly further down, where again you can see the stadium and the nature of the change in levels as the site drops down from the western boundary towards the stadium. So again, as with the other sections, I've got some visuals that have been prepared by the applicant. So firstly, we have the apartment blocks. All four are designed the same. There have been changes in design during the course of the application. They were flat roof, then they were pitched roof. They're now flat roof again, and all of the same design. So as you can see, they're proposed with balconies facing east and west. Each apartment would have a balcony. There would be windows on the southern elevation, but as you can see, the northern elevation, which does face the main road into the residential area, would be completely blank. There is reference to a change in materials, but you'll see in the report that there are concerns about that from a design perspective, given how prominent the northern elevations will be, particularly the one that is immediately south of the main road leading into the residential area, and then the others will also be seen from the public open space around it. So then some visuals of the proposed houses. Now there's a mix of styles. You've got some pitch roof and some flat roof. As you can see, materials would, if permission were to be granted, materials would be something that would be conditioned and so would be agreed later, but you can see that they have indicated the use of a buff brick and also boarding. There's also a lot of textured brickwork proposed and shown on the elevations to provide interest within those elevations. There is also concern with regard to corner plots and whether or not they suitably face both streets that they address, and that's a concern that whilst there's a change in materials proposed, that in itself doesn't create that natural surveillance and sufficient visual interest and activity in the street scene. However, the overall contemporary approach to the form of architecture is considered to be acceptable in this instance. So just some more showing a little bit of the settings. So the top one is looking towards the flats from across the open space. And the bottom one, you've come up from the care home, you've got Telegraph Woods on your left, the stadium on your right, and you can see how the apartment blocks would wrap around following the curve of the stadium road. So I mentioned some sections earlier. A number have been provided. As with the visuals, obviously I haven't shown you every house type that's been proposed, but it's to give you a flavour. The plans obviously have been available on the website for yourselves to have a look at. So these are some sections. Now the top one, you can see you've got the stadium on the right, then you would have the apartments, and then you've got, as I mentioned before, the levels would change. So instead of it being, currently it's generally flat, and then it's got the big bank up towards Telegraph Woods and the neighbouring properties, they would have a gradual increase in the slope of the site, going up to the mound at the top. And then the bottom one is the reverse, so similar layout but seen from the opposite side. So again, you've got the stadium on your left-hand side, then you've got the open space, then you've got the apartments, and then you've got the houses rising up with Telegraph Woods in the background. So this one, I've got my back to the flats and I'm looking towards the existing properties on that are accessed off Telegraph Road. So you've got Telegraph Woods on the left-hand side, and then here you've got the properties on the boundary, which then drops down to David Lloyd Leisure Centre. So you can see you've got two-storey houses, but you do have, on the higher land, you do have some 2.5, 3-storey houses proposed. So there is a mixture of house types. There is comment with regards to the levels and the need to create appropriate separation distances, and in some instances within the site it doesn't meet the council standards for that because of either the type of house type proposed or the levels that are there, so such that the separation distances would be too close. So the bottom one is just a close-up of this area over here near the David Lloyd. So you've got the existing properties. These would have a terrace garden. Everywhere else is generally, it might be slightly sloping, but it would have a continual level for their garden. Here, because of the nature of the site, you would be have a terraced formation for the garden, which in itself isn't a problem, but there are a number of significant trees on the boundary which there is concern about the overshadowing of the usability of the lower part of the garden, which then means the garden spaces are, the usable space is smaller than the plans might indicate. And then finally, as if I've got my back to the stadium, I'm looking west, and these would be the apartments that you would see. And then in between them, you can see some of the houses, and then Telegraph Woods and the existing trees behind. Sorry, excuse me. So the key issues for the residential part of the scheme, obviously we've talked about layout and design. In principle, residential in this part of the site is in accordance with policy WE4 of the local plan. So in principle, residential here would be acceptable, subject to it being an appropriately designed scheme. And as set out, there are concerns with regard to the design of some of the properties, but also in particular the lack of tree planting within the car parks. They're quite extensive, as you all have seen from the layout plans. For the apartment blocks, they've got 4 car parks all in a row, with no planting within them, and our SBD does talk about having planting within the car parks to break them up and add visual interest. So you've got layout, design and landscaping issues. You've also got the visual impact. You'll have seen that, as well as the care home landscape, have also said that a development of this nature, this complexity, should have been considered as part of a landscape visual and impact assessment, which is more thorough and goes into more detail and looks at the actual impacts from a more numerous scenarios. And that hasn't been done, and therefore it's not considered that they've demonstrated it wouldn't have an adverse visual impact on the local area. That's obviously a lack of information. Suggested reason for refusal, so it could be something that could be overcome if more information was submitted and it demonstrated that there wasn't a harm. But at the moment, that's something that's still outstanding. And then, as I touched upon, there's residential amenity standards issues with regards to separation distances and garden sizes. There's also impact on trees and ecology. On the western side, where we mentioned the footpath going round the edge of the woodland out onto Telegraph Road, there's some grade A oak trees on that northwestern boundary. And the tree officers advised that it's not been sufficiently demonstrated that the path and also the changes to the levels that are required in that northwest corner to alter the bank and get the road and the houses in, that they could do that without harming those trees. And they're important trees on the boundary. They're visible in views, and they are, as I said, they're grade A standard. So that's quite a key concern from a tree perspective. It's not felt that there's enough information to demonstrate that they could survive. Also, from the ecology point of view, there's protected species in relation to reptiles. They've been found on site, but they've not identified the retention of habitat for them on site or even a relocated area. So that's something that hasn't been suitably addressed. Again, as with the care home, we talked about noise. Same issues. The noise impact assessment it's not considered to have assessed properly the full extent of the activities that could take place on site and the impact that would have on the amenities of future occupiers. And then also, County Council have made concerns with regard to the layout and the impact on highway safety in terms of some parts of the layout, but also where residents would meet on event days would meet pedestrians coming into the site, because there's an area between the David Lloyd roundabout and the roundabout coming into the residential area, which would be shared surface, which on non-event days would be fine, but on event days there's potential. Some of the time the traffic would be stopped and there wouldn't be an issue, but there's too much likelihood of conflict. So they've raised concerns there. As I said, though, residential is acceptable in principle in this part of the site, and the general design approach is considered to be acceptable. it's obviously there are other neighbouring properties around, but it would be very much seen within the context of the site. So there's an opportunity to do something different and more contemporary on the site. So lastly, the Wellbeing Centre. So we're now the northeast part of the site. You can see David Lloyd in the car park here with numerous trees within it, breaking it up. And the Wellbeing Centre would be located here, just sort of opposite the West Gate, with its own car park, accessed just within this part of the site, so not off the roundabout itself, but further within, and adjacent to, or sort of joining the public open space. So this would be a private facility, so it's not proposed as a health centre as such, or for doctors. It's proposed as a private facility, but it would offer health-related facilities for people in the local area. So just taking some photographs. So when we talked before about being on the mound, but just to the west of the existing stadium road, that's where I'm standing now. You can see the David Lloyd Centre in the distance, and it would be down in this part of the site here, as the land drops down, that the Wellbeing Centre would be located. In the right-hand photograph, I'm standing with my back toward the existing roundabout, where David Lloyd takes its access. You've got the stadium on your left-hand side, and it would be in this lower part of the car park currently that the Wellbeing Centre would be proposed. So then again, some visuals that have been proposed, well, these are the elevations coloured up. So the top one is the elevation that would face the road. So this would be facing towards the stadium. As you can see, it's generally two-storey, a small element of lower ground to reflect the levels. The western elevation, technically there would potentially be public access behind it. Similarly, it's equally well fenestrated. There's quite a interesting good approach to the levels, an interesting architectural approach. The end elevations will also be key given the arrival and exit points for the residential development. So the northern elevation, which is what you would see as you enter towards the residential development with the stadium on your left. That's the northern one. And then the southern one is what you would see as you were in the open space for the residential area and exiting the site. So the key issues, layout and design, aren't any real concerns with regard to that. It's within the urban area, so development could be acceptable in principle. The design approach is considered to be adapt well to the site and be sufficiently well detailed to provide an attractive building in accordance with the policies of WE4. The landscaping, again, the car parking has no planting within it, so that's something else that doesn't accord with the council's requirements. The visual impact of it, generally it's two-storey. It's addressing the change in levels as the site generally slopes up as you come in off Botley Road. And as I indicated, the proposed uses, as set out in the report, it talks about a variety of consultation rooms, but also some health or training facilities. That could be it's considered that could be something that would be a good fit with the existing stadium. It would obviously allow for the Hampshire Wellbeing Centre to relocate and expand. Its current facilities at the southern part of the site are already considered to be too small. So it would allow for the facilities that they offer to be relocated here and then expanded on if there are other opportunities available. So other key issues that arise from the application, but not specifically in relation to the sort of different areas I've just been describing, are the issue of affordable housing. The application does not propose the provision of any affordable housing on the basis that the application wouldn't be viable if affordable housing was provided. Sustainable transport is always a key consideration, and as you'll have seen, there are proposed pedestrian and cycle improvements to Botley Road, which would effectively be looking to create a pedestrian cycle route on the northern side of Botley Road, linking to the shops West End, and also providing an additional crossing point nearer to Marshall Road. And then, in addition, there is the connection through from the development to Telegraph Road. Now, obviously, we've talked about the levels. If it could be provided in a manner which meant that the trees were retained suitably, it would still be, it couldn't be provided as a route that is accessible for all at all times. We wouldn't want to see it lit because of the ecological impact that would have on the woodland, and there would be some stepped elements. However, it is considered that there would be some benefits to the provision of that because it would provide an alternative route for some people some of the time. And there is but for those who don't wish to use that, there is a flat, suitably surfaced route via Marshall Drive and out onto Botley Road. The other issue in regard to water quality, as you'll have seen in the report, and you'll be aware from our policies, we do require 3 stages of natural filtration because the site would ultimately lead to the solent waters which are protected, and therefore the water quality needs to be appropriately secured as part of the development, and there's some further information needed to address the drainage for the car park, which is proposed to be relying on filtration, but there's not enough information being provided to show that filtration would work in terms of the water actually being able to filtrate in, but also that the ground is suitable in terms of its composition to filtrate out any pollutants in the water. And then because of the water quality issues, that would have, currently there is an unknown impact on the European protected sites, so we are unable to complete an appropriate assessment which is required under the Habitat Regulations assessment, because without that information we are unsure of the exact impacts, so we can't make a positive decision without being able to complete that assessment. Right, so those are all of the main issues. I've just got a few more slides. I have nearly finished, but with regard to some updates. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there was the published planning updates paper. As is always the way with an application that's complex and of this size, there are further updates since that was published. So just to confirm, I've received an amended upper ground floor for the apartment block, which means it's now consistent with the elevations. It was the one floor plan which hadn't been changed properly in the latest set of revisions, so I've now got a consistent set of plans. It doesn't change the illustrations before you. It had things like the balconies were in the wrong place, so and the window opening, so that's now consistent. The report also indicated that we didn't have details of the anticipated number of jobs, and the agent has now confirmed that's likely to be in the region of 53 full-time equivalent jobs, with approximately 15 at the Wellbeing Centre, 25 at the hotel and 13 at the care home. But obviously the hotel and the care home, they would be shift work, so those staff wouldn't all be there at the same time. I also need to, for clarity, amend the suggested reason for refusal to 14 to refer to elements. They were referred to in the report, so it's not a new issue, but I didn't reflect in the wording of the policy reason for refusal, apologies, that we also need to refer to the need for any legal agreement to secure a habitat and access management plan for Telegraph Woods, and also a scheduled ancient monument plan. So they were referred to at paragraph 294 and 295, and also those references in 294 and 295 of the report, but they're not new issues I'm raising, I just hadn't reflected it in the wording of the reason for refusal that refers to a lack of a legal agreement. And then finally, we've also had the review of the latest financial viability assessment. I mentioned in the report that it had previously been less than 10%, and it was thought that it would come in at a similar rate. So for a scheme on the basis of no affordable housing, so 100% market affordable, it would come out at a profit level of 8%. Now, ordinarily, development of the nature proposed, we would be looking for just above 18% for a development of this order in order to be a reasonable rate of return for the developer for the development and affordable housing. So it's lower than that. So it is considered that it would be unviable in terms of a reasonable return of profit, and therefore policy DM28 does make reference to allowing the rate of affordable housing to be reduced as a result. They have indicated that policy compliant provision of affordable housing wouldn't make any profit at all, so there would be a deficit. So it's not too dissimilar to what was written in the report, but I just wanted to confirm that I talked about less than 10, and they've confirmed it would be 8. So as a result of all of that, obviously you've got the recommendation before you for refusal. Some of the reasons for refusal relate to lack of information or lack of a legal agreement, and then there are others that relate to specific issues, and this is just the revised wording that I mentioned with regard to the Telegraph Woods Habitat and Access Management Plan and the Scheduled Ancient Monument Plan. It also includes the amendment to this suggested reason for refusal that was in the update paper. So that's the end of my presentation. I've got nothing further to add, but obviously happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that very detailed and thorough presentation. I know you've put an awful lot of work into this, so thank you very much, and also to your colleagues as well. Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the part in the evening where we have public participation. But first of all, we have some statements to be read out by Ross McLean, our local area manager. These are written statements that people have sent in who either couldn't make it this evening, who didn't feel particularly comfortable about speaking in public. So, and these are all in objection to the planning application. So the first one is from Robert Lawrence. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to object in the strongest terms to the above named planning application. I live in Hope Road, West End, and we are already affected by the Aegeus Bowl. This application would deeply affect our ability to live quietly in our already overcrowded village. It should not be allowed to go ahead for several reasons. 1. The village of West End is already a dangerous area for cyclists and pedestrians due to the narrow high street. This road, which is directly joined with Botley Road, which directly passes Aegeus Bowl, carries much more traffic, including heavy goods vehicles, large buses, etc., than it was ever envisioned to accommodate. The high street has remained largely unchanged in my lifetime, and I would venture that if planners were designing West End Village anew, it would not look anything like it is today. The higher intensity of traffic through West End has been caused by additional vehicles from the new surrounding developments. To allow further housing and with accompanying vehicles at the Aegeus would simply load more onto a road never intended for such high volumes. One also has to take into account the already granted development of One Horton Heath and its ensuing traffic. This will also cause a problem, and as more Green Road will become a rat run, this feeding even greater volumes of traffic onto Botley Road, West End High Street. 2. Vehicle access exit from the Aegeus Bowl onto Botley Road will cause even greater congestion. As it appears, there will only be one way in and out. Botley Road will need upgrading as it already floods regularly. Further climate change will only exacerbate this. This will cause further expenses, as having the road over the motorway widened will be a major undertaking. The current repairs at Charles Watts Way gives a good indication of the effect. 3. Air quality pollution in what was only once a green rural area will be highly affected. Not a great look for a council often advertising its green credentials. Not good also for the health of the children and older adults living in the area either. 4. Poor road infrastructure and further influx into a relatively small area will also load a further burden onto local amenities. Our roads are in poor state of repair and potholes pontificate. Further traffic will be doing nothing to help. It's difficult enough to get doctor's appointments now in West End without further loading. Although developers put doctor's surgery into their plans, they inevitably hardly ever get built, as it needs a doctor to undertake the surgery and accommodating costs. We also know there is a shortage of doctors. 5. Why there is an old people's home on the development where there is already a 70-room such development on Moor Hill Road, West End construction, less than half a mile away, surely surplus addition and overdevelopment. This application will cause further intrusion into the lives of ordinary folk who have lived here for many years, spoiling the area and their enjoyment of it. West End is already overdeveloped, and this application degenerates it further. All for a further commercial venture by a developer who really doesn't care too much about local matters, but only their pursuit of gain and profit. I would urge you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Ross. And we do have lots of people down to speak, and meeting is going to take quite a while. So could I ask you, please, to refrain from clapping and cheering? It would get through it a lot quicker. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're all very well aware of the feelings of people here this evening, so thank you. The next one is from Claire Foulkes. Thank you.
I'm writing to express my deep concerns and strong opposition to the proposed development that seeks planning permission for the construction of 174 new dwellings, a care home for 71 individuals, and a large hotel in the heart of our densely populated suburb. While development is crucial for progress, this particular proposal poses significant challenges that could have severe repercussions on our community. 1. Traffic congestion. Our suburb is already grappling with severe traffic congestion, and the proposed development would only exacerbate this problem. Adding a substantial number of new dwellings, a care home and a large hotel will undoubtedly lead to increased vehicular movement, putting additional strain on our already overburdened road infrastructure. The resultant traffic congestion not only diminishes the quality of life for residents, but also poses safety concerns and undermines the overall appeal of our community. 2. Strain on healthcare facilities. Our current healthcare facilities are already stretched to their limits, with a notable lack of doctors and medical resources. The addition of 71 individuals in a care home, plus the 172 dwellings, further intensifies the pressure on our local healthcare system. Without a comprehensive plan to address this strain, granting planning permission for such a development would compromise the well-being of both existing and new residents. 3. Impact on educational facilities. Our schools are operating at maximum capacity, and any increase in the local population should be accompanied by adequate provision for educational facilities. Failing to address this issue alongside the proposed development would result in overcrowded classrooms, stretched resources and diminished education opportunities for our children. 4. Environmental concerns. The proposed development does not seem to adequately address environmental concerns, such as the impact on green spaces, wildlife habitats and overall sustainability. Preserving our environment is paramount, and any development must adhere to strict environmental standards to ensure the long-term health of our community. 5. Community character. Our suburb has a unique character and charm that makes it an attractive place to live. Introducing such a large-scale development without careful consideration for maintaining the existing community aesthetics and ambience could result in a loss of identity and reduce the overall appeal of our neighbourhood. In conclusion, while development is crucial for progress, it must be thoughtful, sustainable and in harmony with the existing needs and capacities of our community. I urge you to carefully reconsider and deny planning permission for this proposed development until comprehensive measures are in place to address the concerns adequately.
Thank you very much, Claire, for sending in that statement. The next statement is from Mary Noyce.
The cricket ground opened in 2001 and has already been several changes over the years. However, the fact that Eastleigh Borough Council owns the land seems to give them carte blanche on any planning applications. The schools, doctors, dentists and the roads in the area are already at bursting point, and this is before the One Horton Heath residents hit the roads. There are already 2 hotels on site at the Aegeus Bowl. Why is there need for a further one? It appears to me that the Eastleigh Borough Council does not adhere to the government green conservation strategy by using our land more sustainably and creating new habitats for wildlife, including the planting of more trees. The fields opposite the entrance to Marshall Drive, which used to be used as an overflow parking for events, which is now housing, used to be teeming with deer. These current development plans will impact deer, bats, foxes, owls, badgers and other wildlife in Telegraph Woods and on the earmarked site. With the planned felling of 69 fully mature trees is a further conservation issue. Does the current cost of the One Horton Heath development not make EBC stop and think? 148 million to buy the land and 300,000 in interest payments every month. EBC has already named as a council likely to go bust before these eye-watering interest rates have started to be paid with council taxpayers' money. In my view, it's about time that they were stopped from building on green space available with the carte blanche attitude. It may also be worth noting that it is no longer called the Aegeus Bowl, but now the Utility Bowl.
Very much, thank you. Right, our next statement is provided by Linda Hughes. Thank you.
My question is, the proposed housing development is very close to the cricket ground with the care home, with vulnerable adults being the closest by the East Gate spectator entrance. Every year the venue holds a large firework display, music events like the Arctic Monkeys and cricket events like the 100. With people living so close, what are the plans to make sure no noise enforcement notices are put in place due to the significant noise impact, therefore affecting the events at the bowl and curtailing of future activities there due to complaints from the new residents? We have a great cricket venue, why ruin it?
Thank you very much for that statement from Linda Hughes, and then I believe we have one more from John Pilcher. Thank you.
I have the following objections. Severe increase of traffic on Botley Road, pollution from exhaust fumes and noise, position of proposed new car park entrance exit on Botley Road, vehicles coming over brow of motorway bridge at a speed which could cause accidents while vehicles entering an existing car park, new car parks within development of over 800 cars causing noise and exhaust pollution and also while queuing to get in and out of car park. My bungalow will have a permanent car park behind it and to the side of it. The car park will be raised, allowing people to see into my property. I will be affected by car headlights, slamming doors, loud people and exhaust pollution. The new hotel will be at the level that will overlook my property. The announcement of a new sponsor for the Aegeus Bowl with Utility Energy with an ambition for world's greenest cricket ground is made a mockery of, with over 800 cars parking plus a minimum of 200 cars for the new 172 dwellings plus care home and wellbeing centre. Over development of site, I would like to ask the following questions for a planning application. If planning successful, would developers remove the 5 parking spaces directly behind my property? Reason, reduce noise and pollution. If application successful, would developers erect acoustic fencing all along my side of the property and rear of property? Reason, reduce noise for cars and people using car parks. If application successful, would developers plant trees and shrub behind my property if they remove 5 car parking spaces? Reason, trees would reduce noise pollution and make areas more appealing to the eye and would be in keeping with landscape behind other properties.
Right, thank you very much for that statement from Mr. John Pilcher, and may I thank all the residents that have sent a statement in. Before we move on, I'd just like to ask Liz if there's anything she'd like to come back on regarding anything in those statements.
No, I don't think so at this time. Thank you.
Right, then we now move on to people who have registered to speak, and if I could ask them if they would speak fairly close to the microphone so everyone is able to hear. Speakers, would I ask you that you only speak on items relevant to this planning application, please? Right, our first speaker is Mr. Samuel Joinson. Mr. Joinson, please. And you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, 1 moment. Okay, ready? My name's Sam Joinson. I'm the Conservative Party's parliamentary candidate for the next general election in Eastleigh and West End. Under English land law, planning decisions should be made based on 2 inputs. Technical inputs, which we have heard tonight in respect of environmental, transport, local policy, and I think Elizabeth Harrison's team has done a great job in showing why these technical inputs show that this development application should be rejected. But there is also a second input, democratic inputs. Through the history of English planning law, from the Town and County Planning Act of 1947 all the way to the Levelling Up Act of 2023, there's the core principle, and that most recent piece of legislation states it, that local people should be at the heart of development. Public participation in planning decisions, in my view, is critical for 2 key reasons. Firstly, it is an opportunity for people to provide a unique perspective in respect of planning issues that perhaps the planners themselves are not privy to. For example, the person who drives down West End High Street every evening in a traffic jam. For example, somebody who enjoys a spring crisp morning over Telegraph Woods looking out on the ridgeline, not being obscured by trees. Secondly, it is important that people are allowed to participate and have their voices heard to balance the imbalances between deep-pocketed developers who can put together very detailed planning applications and a community voice as a whole. And this application I'm going to go on to explain is a textbook example of a community coming together to explain why this is a bad idea. And if I may say so, Ed Davey, your leader, fully agrees with this. And the Lib Dem Party...
Excuse me, sir, can you just... It's not about politics, it's about planning. Thank you.
Well, okay, so a leader of our country states that a community-led approach to planning where local residents were involved in the whole decision-making process is his ambition for the country. So I would ask you to follow the advice of your very own leader of your party and to follow the voices and the opinion in this room and take this democratic engagement right to the core of this decision. There are three main examples of why this is a textbook example of our community coming together. Firstly, we have about 100 people here tonight who've come out to express their concerns with this development. We also had about 100 people on a crisp January morning, Sunday morning, a couple of weeks ago. We had 680 objections that came in, which must be pushing near record levels of objections for a housing development of this size. And lastly, together with a gentleman called Russell, we have put together a petition, which unfortunately for procedural reasons I'm not allowed to present now, with 800 signatures from across our community saying no. That's probably more than the West End South and West End North councillors received to get elected to their posts today. Therefore, it is very clear-cut. West End is against this. This shouldn't happen. It should be refused without deferral, and that should be the end of the matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joinson. As I say, this is about planning policy and not about politics this evening. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Right. Our next speaker Thank you very much. Right, our next speaker is Councillor Steve Broomfield, Hampshire County Councillor. Thank you. And can I ask you, Councillor Broomfield, if you can speak closer to the microphone so everyone can hear. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you, Chair. I'm, as you say, Councillor Steve Broomfield. I'm a Hampshire County Councillor representing West End North, which is the other side of Botley Road, but close enough that I have an interest in the utility Rose Bowl, as I shall now always call it. I am here, obviously, to object to the proposal, and I would like to congratulate Liz and her team for all the hard work they've undergone in getting where we are today. Is it 2 years, 500 amendments, or something like that? I would imagine there's been some very late nights and some very sleepless nights over all this. And I'd also like to thank the Parish Council for mobilising all of you to be here tonight. It really is good to see so many people taking part. As a Borough Councillor on the Bishopstoke, Ferrick and Horton Heath Committee, I'm afraid we very seldom get these sorts of numbers, so well done. All I would say is that, yes, I do support the very welcome decision to reject this. And some of the things in there are exactly the things that my own submission were on. Hampshire County Council, Hampshire Highways, comments about on-site and off-site traffic. Having been to many events at the Utility Rose Bowl over the years, one-day internationals, full test matches and other events, getting down that service road when there's a crowd turning out is an absolute nightmare. If I lived in those houses or those flats, or I had an elderly relative in the care home, goodness knows how I'd get in at the end of close of play. Off-site as well, the mixed cycle path and footpath along Botley Road looks like a disaster waiting to happen. And also Hampshire Constabulary's reducing crime team report, and Liz herself mentioned it in her report, the lack of natural surveillance. Now I think it's the fairly ill-fated Radburn style of building estates, which I recommend you to Google at some point. Obviously Liz already knows that, I'm talking to you at the back. But the Radburn estate is something we really should be moving away from. The final thing I would say is, with all these problems, with all these difficulties, and with all these reasons for rejecting, I don't think this can be deferred. I think it should be rejected out of hand. It should not be deferred to come back again with a few more amendments to go through all this all over again. It looks like it needs tearing up and starting from a clean piece of paper. So I would fully urge members to reject the plan completely and not vote for a deferral. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Broomfield. Our next speaker speaking in objection is Russell Prince Wright, who I believe is a West End Parish Council. Mr. Russell Wright, thank you.
Good evening, councillors, officers of the council and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I was going to actually talk about the level of concern expressed by the public, the local public, but as Sam beat me to that, I just have a copy of the 800 signatures here if the council members would like to see it at some point in time for the petition. But I would like to focus just on a couple of material matters with regards to this application. The local plan permits development at the AGS Bowl only if it facilitates improvements to it as a sporting venue and doesn't compromise its function. The developer's public consultation document justified housing based on it providing funds for promised venue improvements, all of which have been withdrawn since. There will be no spectacular processional ramp. The fan zone is now simply a partial demarcation line between fans and residents, ending halfway along Marshall Drive, and the new pavilion might, quote, be added at a later stage if economic conditions prevail. According to the World Health Organization, sound levels in excess of 85 decibels could lead to health and mental well-being problems for site residents, particularly those sensitive to irregular, loud noises such as inhabitants of the care home that suffer from mental impairment. Levels of up to 92 decibels were recorded in the centre of the proposed housing during the Arctic Monkeys concert. This application compromises the venue's function through the conflict caused by mixing spectators and residents in the fan zone and by restrictions imposed on future events due to residential noise impact. As a result, Eastleigh Borough's Council's Senior Pollution Control Officer could not support the application. Also contrary to the local plan, the proposed development causes harm to Telegraph Woods. Service roads and parking bays at 6 metres above the base of the woods would result in light and sound penetrating the tree canopy, disrupting in particular nocturnal species. The closest dwellings to the woods are now proposed 2.2 metres higher than before, standing at 16 metres above the base of the woodland. Their shading would cause the demise of adjacent trees and other flora. The planned felling of 69 mature trees, some of which are protected individuals, and replacing them with high mortality rate saplings would lead to a decrease in biodiversity, and the increased recreational footfall from the new 500 residents would threaten wildlife habitats. Finally, the removal of all of the open scrubland surrounding the car park would result in a loss of grazing and foraging land currently used by deer, badgers, foxes and birds, and habitat destruction for insects and reptiles. The proposed eco-buffer is too narrow, incomplete, and includes urban recreational furniture. To minimise the impact on the environment, a wider gap should be maintained between any development and the woodland, with construction constrained to and built at the level of the existing car park. The applicant was given ample time to improve their proposal and should not be offered further deferment. For example, the care home location objection was raised months ago, but the applicant refused to make any changes. This development is unsustainable, delivers no tangible benefit to the sporting venue, results in harm to the sink of Telegraph Woods, and will create significant additional strain on local infrastructure and amenities. I therefore respectfully request the committee to refuse this inappropriate application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prince Wright. We now have Sarah Turl, who I believe is the Chair of West End Parish Council. Sarah.
Thank you. Right, this is going to be a canter. I hope you can hear me clearly. Right, good evening, councillors, officers of the council, members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm Chairman of West End Parish Council, keeping my points to material planning considerations which have been discussed and agreed by full council and include concerns raised to us by residents that we represent. Following on from Councillor Prince Wright, the additional material concerns we have relate to 1. Siting of the care home. The care home continues to be proposed outside of the designated residential area, contrary to local plan policy WE4, despite this being raised by the planning officer some time ago. It would also be the 4th care home within a 500-metre radius, creating further pressure on recruiting already scarce local care staff. There are no affordable homes on the site, and the remaining properties will be marketed at 10% premium over local average values due to their proximity to the venue. This may encourage short-term lets, Airbnbs, attracting temporary spectator clientele rather than extending and complementing the existing village community. It will not address the availability of affordable homes for the local population. Local plan policy WE4 has not been applied correctly to the proposed development. WE4 contains a number of conditions that all need to be met for any development to proceed at the site. The local area requires more amenities and improvements to infrastructure before further housing can be considered. Healthcare is already overwhelmed, with access to GPs and dentists overloaded and at breaking point. We regularly have these issues raised with us by local parishioners who struggle for timely access to healthcare. Although in the initial stages of the development additional GP capacity was mentioned, it appears the addition of a private healthcare facility is the only offer. This will only improve access if you're able to pay and does not provide open access to all, exacerbating health inequalities. The local road infrastructure is already severely congested, especially in Botley Road, as a main artery leading to Tollbar Way roundabout, which has reduced capacity for 2-lane queuing from the West End approach. This results in long, slow-moving traffic queues, not only at peak periods, but at busy times during the day and weekends, with traffic backed up past the traffic lights at the entrance to the site. This is exacerbated considerably when events are held on the site. Our review of ONS data suggests a greater level in vehicle movements to the site above those suggested in the traffic reports. We are concerned that any residents wishing to access their new properties will be severely impacted at busy times and during large events, as the only mitigation seems to be marshalling. Previous experience show this to be inconsistent in quality. It should be noted that when we raise these concerns about residents' access and parking, when the 2 developments at Moor Green Hospital and Miller's Walk in Botley Road were granted permission, the result is angry residents who move into a new development unaware of these impacts, with complaints coming to the parish council on a regular basis. Indeed, we understand that Hampshire Cricket would not provide marshalling to the Miller's Walk development, and taxpayers' money is used for Eastleigh Borough Council to provide marshals to ensure people have access to their property and not overwhelmed with parking during large events. If you were minded to grant permission for the housing, a separate access and egress would need to be built to protect new residential amenities. I would ask as well that you reject this proposal, and I'd like to thank you very much for your time and consideration of these points this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Our next speaker is Ben Coles, speaking objection. Mr. Coles.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, members of the committee. I'm a local resident, and I understand that there is a government target to build houses. I understand that there's an expectation that developments are approved. But I believe that this development shouldn't be permitted. Not only does it offer poor quality housing, crammed together with very little in the way of additional amenities, I believe it's not actually a development that members of our community would like to live in. There is no low-cost home or affordable housing for young people to move into, and we know that the noise levels will be utterly unacceptable. During match days, residents will struggle to access their properties via roads and will be subject to the inadequate parking arrangements and coning that we already know take place from experience. Indeed, Highway Hampshire Hampshire Highways' own report indicate that the traffic flows at Botley Road Marshall Drive will be just within capacity. This is simply not good enough, as we know that even the smallest issue, whether that be heavy rainfall causing flooding or just a slight surge in traffic, will push wait times far past what residents feel is a reasonable level. Simply put, this development does not provide anything that the residents of West End need. Indeed, Hampshire Child Services indicate that there will be insufficient primary and secondary school places in catchment, and although they've requested Section 106 payments to mitigate that, realistically there's certainly for primary school no scope that that can be delivered in catchment. Furthermore, the provision of a health centre will not allow residents access to already overstretched GP services. Instead, it will add to the existing infrastructure and demand, which we already know residents struggle greatly with. The impact on Telegraph Woods will be significant, with the development of a formalised route through it, significantly impacting and detracting from the character of the woods. And the height of the development will result in significant amount of light pollution, particularly into the canopy of trees, affecting things like bats and night resting birds. Councillors, I ask that you reject this committee. It does not provide anything that West End, it doesn't improve things, and it's not a quality development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coles. Our next speaker is Peter Rea. Ray, thank you. Ray, thank you, sorry.
Good evening. A lot of what I was going to raise has already been briefly touched upon by other people. In particular, the question that needs to be asked is, as was raised by a former speaker, would you want to live there? And the points I was wishing to make is that the site is totally unsuitable for housing and the care home, because the noise levels over a sustained period of time would make living there unbearable. With cricket matches, these aren't events that are to a set time, they're often to 3 or 5 days. The times that they start and finish tend to vary, depending even on weather conditions. So therefore, the impact on traffic in Botley Road is indeterminate. It's estimated that the developments on the site of housing, care home, hotels, wellness centre, etc., will add an extra 1,000 car movements onto the already overcrowded Botley Road. I'm not a cricket fan, I'm a Saints supporter. And football matches go for a set time of 90 minutes generally. Every couple of weeks a home match. The cricket thing goes on, as I already said, for a much, much longer period of time. With a football match, half an hour before the match, half an hour later, and everything's back to normal. With a cricket match, that thing, as I say, can go on for much longer time, can finish at no particular time, and is much more of a problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ray, for your comments, and apologies for not pronouncing your surname correctly. If I do mispronounce anyone's surname, then I'll give my apologies now. Right, our second speaker is Rebecca Vals. No? No, she's not here to speak. Rebecca Vals? No? Okay, then we'll move on to our next speaker then, who is Neil Nutburn. Mr. Nutburn.
Thank you very much. Okay, as usual, most things have already been covered, but here we go. I'm speaking as a resident from Hope Road, so not that far away. And most of my discussion will be about, proposal will be about the residential proposal and other areas. Environmental health and noise. Upon a time we could have sustained a moderate increase in pollution to the air, both from vehicle fumes, filth and the site noise. Boundaries on this front have already been exceeded. Further development will only increase on this, as well as the increase in litter. Flood, drainage. In heavy downpours, an element of flooding can be expected. Open plains of grass and flora absorbed a fair share of surface water. Then the old Mountbatten Hospital was converted to properties. Further development in the grounds behind Anchor Lawson Lodge care home and the Rose Bowl sport developments and grounds itself have added massive negative impact as water has nowhere to drain. Excuse me. Further development will remove even more natural drainage. And the icing on the cake is the cutbacks in governmental expenditure on clearing of roads, and in particular drains. Have a look at them as you walk around, resulting in even less avenues for the water to go and increased flooding. Just look at the B3035 as a good example of this. Local services. The infrastructure is not in place. There is a plethora of complaints concerning the Living Well Partnership and their struggles to have sufficient staff, doctors, in their failing of patients, a population as it is. Further development, a number of residents will simply break it. This is a massive issue in its own right and needs to be addressed separately. Nonetheless, local services will not be able to take on an increase in population. Nature. Pollutants and landscapes aside, the natural habitats are eroding, with creatures being forced away from their homes. Creatures that normally roam, such as badgers or deer, can no longer do so. Hedgehogs have been on a 30 to 75% decline since 2000. It isn't coincidental that new housing developments with smaller, closed-off gardens contribute to this downturn. Insects and bugs will decline, as will those that feed off them, such as bird life. The whole impact is and will continue to cause havoc on the ecosystem if we continually develop over their habitat. And finally, our identity. We have to remember that West End Village is that, a village, not a town. The area we live in forms part of our identity. New development will further erode the character of the place that we call home. We cannot sustain further development in an already overcrowded village. The additional proposal will further erode the identity that this personable village used to have. These are but a few reasons why West End Botley cannot sustain further developments focusing on our residential. My wife and I fervently oppose this, and hereby wish to make this our formal objection to supporting others' greed at our expense and reject, not defer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nutburn. Our next speaker is Julie Barney. And I'd just like to mention at this time that I did say that we would have a comfort break, and we will have a comfort break at the end of all the speakers. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak. Most of my points have already been covered, but I just would like to reiterate what has already been said. I've lived in West End. I'm a resident here, lived here for about 40 years, and I can't get a doctor's appointment. My dentist is in Chandlersford. My husband's dentist is in Sarrisville Green. My daughter's is in Hedge End, so that's the closest. But there's already so much of an impact on local schools and parking for event days. Don't understand why we need another hotel when there's already two. And I just feel that our roads are deteriorating so badly with potholes. Recently, I was trying to travel from West End to my in-laws who live in Waltham Chase. I couldn't get there because of flash flooding. The first time I've ever experienced flash flooding, and I believe it's caused by all the buildings that have been going on locally. Allington Lane was impassable. And I think it's just going to get worse if we do more building. I think that's probably all, other than the fact that I do believe there would have been even more objections, but a lot of the residents in West End are elderly and probably don't have online access and are not aware of the, you know, the proposals. So, just one more point. On event days, if there was an incident at the care home, how would an ambulance get in there?
Thank you very much for your comments. We'll now go to Councillor Tonya Craig, who's a Hampshire County Councillor. Councillor Craig, please.
Most points have been raised, Chair, but just in your report, you had about 53, I think it was, new jobs coming through. 13 of those would be for a care home. I would just like to make the point that you will probably need for a care home that size more than 13, and I wouldn't like Hampshire County Council's traffic figures to be skewed on that. Having just done lots of visits around care homes, it's going to probably be double that for the amount of people in that care home. So, you know, those figures on traffic movements without events being held need to be looked at properly and made sure that the traffic is correct on those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig. Sorry, we do have a few more, sorry. Liz Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know, my name is Liz Jarvis, and I'm the Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate for Eastleigh. From all my conversations with residents and the letters that I've received, the emails, survey responses over the last 18 months, it is clear that the local community is overwhelmingly opposed to this application, and I share their concerns. This application should be thrown out. There are two main reasons for this. Firstly, the application does not conform to the council's local plan. The venue made strong representations to the planning inspector when the local plan was agreed to include limited residential development in the northwest corner of the overall site within what is already the built-up area. The council worked to limit this, and the policy in the local plan was one of the final ones to finally get agreed, as the council was determined to limit development and not see impact on the wider countryside. So it is very disappointing that the application, despite lots of advice from the council, extends built development out into the countryside with the care home proposal, has a poorly designed additional hotel, and argues that it should not have to deliver affordable housing for local people with all the homes for sale. Lots of developers try to get away without providing affordable housing, and the government should tighten up rules to ensure that affordable housing is always provided on sites allocated in local plans. This one is using the justification that the housing must be for sale to fund other improvements to the venue. That cannot be right. They should have a business plan to do this. What is proposed here is far more than in the local plan agreed by the government, and would also create a lot more traffic pressure on local roads. Secondly, it has taken far too long to reach a decision on this application. This application has been hanging over residents' heads for over 18 months. The fact that insufficient information is used for so many of the refusal reasons shows that even after all this time, the venue has just not answered critical areas of concern. They say they want the council to defer this tonight for yet more months of delays. That is simply unreasonable for residents living close to the site. If anything, the council has been too generous already and should have brought this to committee months ago with these reasons for refusal. So I hope councillors will back the planning officer's recommendations for refusal this evening, but also strengthen them to object to a lack of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. John Reid, I believe, is registered to speak. Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Good evening.
Thank you for letting me talk tonight. Most of the points have been covered. Virtually everything has been covered, but I don't see what bit of difference a second entrance off of Botley Road will make for getting in and out the car park. Botley Road queues up, rush hour, and 80% of the weekend with people trying to get to the shops, to the motorways. A point that was already made, how would you get emergency services into a care home when you are closing the road off possibly to pedestrians? It's impossible. A care home needs 24/7 access with ambulance, doctors, whatever they require. Also, personal note, on a match day, the amount of pedestrians that walk on and off the road to walk from Hedge End, either whether it's from the station, abandoning their cars in local car parks or houses, they walk up Botley Road in the road everywhere. I mean, it's a hazard as it is. So, yeah, I'm against it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. And our final person who's registered to speak in objection is Judith Tyser. Thank you.
I was going to waiver my right to speak tonight because I feel everything has been eloquently covered, particularly by this gentleman and some other people. But as a resident that lives in Cllr Gardens, which hasn't been mentioned, you've talked about Telegraph Heights, you've talked about Telegraph Road. It is almost impossible to get out of Cllr Gardens on a match day or event day. The care home, the West End Councillor mentioned there were 5 care homes. There are actually 7 because there's the new one being built on the A27. I counted them up because that was going to be my point. But actually, again, speaking as a local person that has to live with the Aegeus Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Utility Bowl, whatever you want to call it, we've watched the ground there change, move with the environmental impact it's had. But we have Fielder's Court at the end of Kenilworth Gardens. We have difficulty getting utility vehicles in, dust carts on match days. They can't come because of the parking. There is a total ignorance of when the cones are put out by people that are visiting the events. This is not the development, but only last September I was verbally abused in my own road with an elderly relative because somebody had blocked the way because they wanted to park. And there were cones. They were moving the cones. They just put them on cars. My other point, which I was going to make, and it's quite a personal one, is that back in March 22, I contacted LDA when I went to have a look at the initial proposals. And I couldn't believe that there was going to be another hotel. There was going to be assisted living, it started off, then it became a care home, which actually for elderly people with the noise, because the noise problem in Kenilworth Gardens is unbearable, especially sometimes with the Arctic monkeys. Maybe it's my age. But I was also, it was mentioned when I initially spoke to LDA that I didn't like it because it was in my backyard. Well, my comment to the council originally was, if I can't fight for my backyard, the future for the future generations and our children and grandchildren, who's going to do it? I'm sick of that term being used by politicians, councillors or developers who want their own way. And I think it's time now that the council actually manned up, womaned up, gendered up and stopped this, because we've had enough. And to quote, this is from a Mark Russell from LDA that wrote in quite a rude email to me in response saying I didn't know what I was doing and maybe I didn't. There are far more eloquent people here on planning. But to quote, this development is not biologically damaging. It will increase biodiversity. We need to think about our planet over profits.
May I first thank everyone for coming along this evening and speaking, and also for the statements. We do really encourage community engagement, and it's great to see you all here this evening, so thank you very much once again. Right, I'll now ask Liz Harrison if you come back on some of the points that have been raised. Thank you.
To be fair, I think most of the issues raised have been, are addressed and discussed in the report or were mentioned in my presentation, so I won't respond to all the individual issues because, as I said, the report addresses most of them. 2 points I did want to pick up on. I think one of them is addressed in the report, but I just want to make it clear. With regard to the care home, obviously, yes, emergency access would be required at all times. However, the application does allow for the care home to use the existing emergency access that is available for emergency vehicles during event days. So it wouldn't be via Botley Road and Marshall Drive. It's a separate access that would be available at all times if required. And then secondly, the other point was with regard to employment figures and traffic flows. Just to confirm that the employment figures were given to me very recently, and the County Council's comments were based on the transport assessment and supporting documents, which would have looked at trip levels related to similar types of development. So it wasn't linked specifically to those employment figures that I was given, but they do look at traffic flows that arise from existing developments elsewhere. So I just wanted to include those 2 points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Right, we'll now move to people who are speaking in support of the application. And I hope you will show them the same respect as you've shown each other this evening. Right, so, as I said before, they have to have equitable time, and we've had 40 minutes on people objecting. So, I should allow 40 minutes for people speaking in support. We actually have 2 registered to speak in support, so I'm going to ask, if possible, that you don't use all the time available. So the first person to speak, thank you, the first person to speak is Philip Allen from Boyer Planning, and Ross McLean will actually put you on a stopwatch and time you, so if you want to do 20 minutes each, whatever, thank you.
You'll be pleased to know I won't be taking up the whole 20 minutes. Good evening, my name is Philip Allen of Boyer Planning, and I'm speaking in support of the application in front of you. The existing stadium is a significant asset to the region, both from a sporting and economic perspective, which is reflected in the Council's local plan as it is subject to its own site allocation policy. During the local plan examination, we worked closely with officers in formulating a policy that allows for major new development at the site, highlighting that land around the existing stadium is an appropriate location for the range of uses proposed. The proposals will deliver a significant number of benefits, and in respect to these, I would just like to highlight some of them. The provision of a new matchday car park, which will result in improvements to the operation of the stadium by helping to reduce conflict between vehicles and spectators. The car park would be designed to be low-key in landscape and visual terms, and except on match or event days, would largely be seen as an informal open green space. Adjacent to this new car park, a new fan zone is proposed that runs alongside Marshall Drive, which will greatly enhance the spectator experience for those people arriving and leaving the stadium. To facilitate this sporting enhancement, it is necessary to remove some existing trees. However, these are generally lower quality specimens, which will be more than offset by an extensive landscaping scheme. A new hotel is proposed, the need of which is supported by your officers, the principle of which was also supported, whilst its design was informed by feedback from the Council's design review panel. The proposals will deliver 170 new homes in a range of sizes and types that will make a positive contribution to the Council's housing land supply. The layout of this part of the development has evolved during the application process, following feedback from the Council's design officer and design review panel, resulting in a reduction in the number of proposed new homes. The recent changes made have been welcomed by the design officer and, as illustrated by our submitted visuals, will deliver a contemporary, high-quality development set in generous landscape areas. The proposals also include the provision of a 71-bed care home, which is located within the defined urban area and on part of the site that has already been developed. Whilst evidence submitted as part of the application identifies a clear need for this type of accommodation, which is supported at both local and national policy levels. As a result, the provision of a care home at the site is supported in principle by your planning officers, and we strongly believe that its proposed location, adjacent to existing development, is appropriate. A new wellbeing centre will enhance and broaden the range of services on offer when compared to the existing centre. It will form a new health hub comprising of a range of health and fitness related functions, along with other space that will be able to be utilised by both existing and future residents, and as a consequence is supported by your planning officers. The proposals include multiple other benefits, including other stadium enhancements, new publicly accessible open space, and a biodiversity net gain of 20%, which has been supported by evidence forms part of the application. The application was supported by an extensive suite of documents which carried out a detailed assessment of the scheme. However, in bringing forward proposals of this complexity, we recognise there's a need for a number of competing interests to be addressed. As a result of this, we have sought to engage positively with your statutory constituencies to address issues as they have arisen. This has naturally resulted in an iterative process whereby issues have been identified, narrowed, and then resolved. In some areas, this process has not been fully completed. For example, Hampshire County Council are content that the proposals would not have any adverse impact on the operation of the highway network, agree in principle to measures...
Excuse me, sorry. Can you refrain from calling out while the gentleman's speaking? Thank you very much. Thank you. We were all very quiet when you were speaking. Thank you.
Agree in principle to measures to enhance sustainable travel along Botley Road, but still seek minor changes to the layout of parts of the development. We firmly believe that given additional time, we will be able to resolve a number of issues where your officers have raised concerns. In addition, we consider that given the overall policy objective of the site allocation, there are some elements of the proposals where some impact is inevitable. For example, the provision of the new fan zone will result in the loss of some trees. However, we consider that this benefit, along with the proposed mitigation, clearly outweigh any harm. We are incredibly proud of the proposals in front of you, and as a project team we have worked hard alongside your planning officers to develop a scheme that will deliver a high quality development fitting for this location, and are confident in its planning case. I clearly hope that you are able to support the proposals, but if not, then we would ask for a deferral to provide us with an opportunity to continue our dialogue with officers to resolve the outstanding matters. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Allen. Thank you very much. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker speaking in support is Mr. Rod Bransgrove from Hampshire Cricket. Mr. Bransgrove.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, executives, councillors of Eastleigh Borough Council, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am indeed Rod Bransgrove, and as Chairman of Hampshire Sport and Leisure Group, I think I'm the person responsible for this application ultimately. Therefore, I'm going to give you some information as to how it's come about, and ask for your indulgence if I can have a few moments of your time. Somebody mentioned that, well, first of all, when I took over this business, you may recall, we took over a defunct cricket club, which were proposing to move to this amazing new ground in West End, but had run out of money. And of course, after 23 years of being chairman of the site, I can understand completely why that was. But we determined to save the cricket club and to try and build something worthwhile around it, something that we would all be distinctly proud of. And we did it according to a business plan that somebody mentioned earlier on. And of course, the business has always been run in accordance with business plans ever since that time. But it hasn't always been easy. Over the years, we've had a number of challenges to the development of the plan. The collapse of the banks, of course, in 2008 to 2009, the judicial review on our planning permission for the hotel, insolvencies of the construction companies building the hotel, and of course the absence of any assistance from our national governing body, the ECB. However, finally, with the benefit of the sponsorship from, first of all, Aegeus and a new partnership with Eastleigh Borough Council, we completed that amazing Hilton Hotel in 2015. Despite these enhanced facilities, the ECB remained resistant to include the Aegeus Bowl in its international plans. Our tussle with the ECB has been long and at times bitter, but in a paradoxical twist of fate, the COVID-19 pandemic proved an extraordinary opportunity in the summer of 2020, when we successfully hosted 50% of the entire international program at our biosecure environment. A change of administration at the ECB late in 2022 led to a sea change in the relationship with our governing body. The following spring, it was announced that the Aegeus Bowl had been eventually awarded 3 test matches during the 5 years from 2027, including the much coveted test match. This achieved our ambition of joining the country's great iconic cricket stadia here in Eastleigh. But our challenge now has to be to remain at the forefront of this highly competitive market. We can't rest. Some parts of the stadium are now 23 years old and in dire need of repair or renewal. Equally, we must pursue rigorously our business objectives. First of all, producing the finest customer experience in a robust and viable manner, whilst observing our sustainability targets and generally trying to be a good neighbour in our local communities. The achievement of our successes to date have incurred significant debt, and servicing this has put a huge load on the group's profit and loss account. It's absolutely critical that we start to reduce this debt burden by further development of the Utilita Bowl and the whole site in the manner of our application. The Utilita Bowl has been estimated to contribute an economic benefit of some £50 million per annum for the region, and currently we employ up to 500 people, mostly local, across the whole group. This will all be at risk if we can't achieve a timely agreement to our further developments. Now, we have spent a lot of time on this application, as many have mentioned, and it has incurred delays. It's been deferred from time to time, at all cases, incidentally, at the request of Eastleigh Borough Council. And we're hugely disappointed, therefore, at the outcome and the current recommendation to refuse. Our sincere and earnest plea to the voting members is this: rather than rejecting outright and facing an inevitable, time-consuming and expensive appeal process, which incidentally we are advised by both our consultants and by the King's Council that we stand a very good chance of winning, could we not have an extension of, say, 2 months, during which time we can A, address the technical issues to the Council's satisfaction? It's our earnest belief that we can do that. And B, remove the care home from this proposal. I urge you to consider this positively. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bransgrove. Thank you. Liz, is there anything you'd like to come back on? Any of that? No, you okay? Right, okay then, ladies and gentlemen, I did say we would take a comfort break, and I think this will be the right time. So we will take a 15-minute break if you want to use the facilities. I believe the bar is still open if you want a non-alcoholic drink. Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much. We will now continue with the meeting. And at this juncture, I'm going to open up to councillors for questions only at this point, councillors. So any questions you may have regarding this application, please. Councillor Kylre.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I do actually have a number of questions, but I would like a bit more clarification, if I may, about the policy WE4, which has been referred to by a number of speakers, because in the report it did say It's the relation to what is acceptable and where is acceptable in relation to complying with WE4, because I am concerned that in the report it does seem to sort of contradict itself in a couple of occasions where it's talking about it being related to sports and that residential is therefore acceptable. I'm not quite sure how residential is a sports facility, because I don't think it is unless I don't understand what residential means, which I thought was housing. The other issues I have was in relation to affordable housing and how it meets the test of whether it can deliver affordable housing on site. I know it was mentioned by one of the speakers, and I wonder if we can have some clarification with regards to that test as to what can be delivered. Is it linked to the viability of other elements within the application as to whether it can deliver affordable? And my concern with that would be that the housing element of this application should be looked in isolation and not dependent on the viability of other parts of the site being delivered rather, as being the end of the equation of whether affordable housing can be delivered. So I would like some more clarification on that, because I cannot understand how you can have those numbers of dwellings, 100 and whatever it is, and flatted elements within that and not deliver affordable housing. That completely, in my view, goes against what we should be doing with regards to delivering homes for all tenures and for people who are in need of housing. So if we could have some more clarification on that, I'd appreciate that. The other question I have is regards to the loss of trees, which I am very concerned about, and specifically the ones on Marshall Drive and Botley Road. And has any assessment been undertaken as to the loss of carbon or pollution capture that those trees potentially do deliver at the moment with regards to sequestration and their loss, which clearly won't be able to be mitigated about, because obviously the number of trees on site will be of lesser stature than the ones that are being lost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curl. Liz, would you like to come back on those questions that Councillor Curl's raised? Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
Of course.
Sorry, just trying to find something in the report. So with regard to policy WE4, it's quite detailed, it's quite specific, but it starts with that development will be supported where it facilitates the site's important role in meeting sporting needs in the borough and wider area, complements the high quality design and open setting of the site, and protects the settlement gap. Taking these aims into account, development will be permitted if it meets all of the following criteria. And then there's A to K, I think it is. One of those sets out that inside the urban edge, which is described in the local plan policies map, development is for outdoor or indoor sports and recreation, leisure, hotel or office and research use. But it also says in a sub-criterion point that any residential development is located solely in the northwest corner of the site. So that is that triangular area. The apartment blocks are actually outside of that area, as mentioned in the report. So it's generally a curved line that follows the western edge of the apartment blocks. So approximately in that position there, this is the area where the policy says residential is acceptable. Everything else that's within the urban area is only suitable for those other uses that I talked about in terms of sports and recreation, leisure, hotel or office and research. And the urban edge, the care home is within the urban edge, but outside of the area identified for residential. And then generally the urban edge is in this approximate position here. So everything east and southeast of the stadium is in the countryside and settlement gap, where the policy talks about, oops, sorry, wrong laptop. Outside the urban edge, as defined by the policies map, development is for outdoor sports and recreational purposes only, including ancillary facilities of appropriate location, scale and design to protect the settlement gap, such as a golf clubhouse. And it was under this point that it was considered in the recommendation before you that the car park would be an ancillary facility to the stadium as a whole. So although it's outside of the urban edge, it was considered that in principle it's acceptable, but then we have to look at the impact of that, and it's the impact of that on the settlement gap that's concerned due to its visual impact. Hopefully that clarifies that point with regard to the policies. In terms of affordable housing, the way generally viability is assessed is that the general costs and revenues of a development are looked at, and then it is considered against, there's general government guidance and standard approach that has to be followed. And the general approach is to look to see whether, if in providing affordable housing, the development would provide what is considered to be a reasonable, recognised rate of return on the investment. And that it depends slightly on the development, but it was considered with the mix of development elements proposed, you'd be looking at 18.2% as the recognised profit that it would be anticipated to and reasonable to achieve on a development of this nature. The costs have been analysed by our own consultants, and there have been differences of opinion and in terms of the individual details. However, they have concluded that looking at what was being submitted and their own analysis, that it would only produce a 8% profit, so 10.2% less than the recognised rate of return, and that would only achieve that if it was 100% market property. If it was included an affordable, policy compliant level of affordable housing provision, then it wouldn't make a profit, it would make a deficit. So the general guidance is that if it doesn't meet the recognised reasonable rate of profit, then it would be a scheme that's considered to be unviable, and it could be justified to not provide affordable housing. So our policy DM 28 refers to the possibility of looking at reduced levels of affordable housing if considered that provision of affordable housing would make the scheme unviable. So that's how the general approach is taken. This one did include all the development elements within the financial viability assessment, and that was obviously what was considered by our consultants. I have asked them whether it would be reasonable just to look at the housing element, and they have advised that you could just look at the housing element, so just the costs and the revenue that would be generated by the housing elements alone and not the rest of the development. They said that could be reasonable to take that. That's a different approach, but it would be still fall within the remit of the general guidance. However, they haven't done that detailed assessment. That wasn't what was submitted by the applicant. It's not what they've reviewed, but they did advise that from their knowledge and working of what they've done so far, they would anticipate that would also not be viable. So that's the advice that they've given us, and that's some of that I included as the update in the presentation today, but that's the general process and the general advice we've got. In terms of your third point about the loss of trees, it hasn't been assessed with regard to carbon or pollution capture. It's not a calculation that was before us. It's not a requirement of our policies. So I don't have that information before me. The report, and I was just trying to find it, but I labelled the wrong bit, does set out the number of tree losses, and whilst so trees have objected, as you'll see in the report, in terms of the general level of tree loss. The Trees and Development SPD does talk about starting from a viewpoint of retaining trees wherever possible, unless it can be justified and there's suitable mitigation. So in looking at the impact on the existing trees, the tree officer has raised an objection, but also indicated that they would take advice from the landscape officer as to whether the proposed landscaping scheme offers suitable mitigation for the replacement tree value that we'd be looking for in accordance with our SPD. But landscape have commented that, yes, a certain number of trees are proposed, 120 something I think it is, I'm just trying to find the figures. But number of them are, numerous ones are in positions that they don't think would be sustainable, and you couldn't rely on those trees to survive and have longevity of life. So therefore, the report concludes that they're not providing that appropriate level of mitigation. So there could be a situation where there is tree loss, but it's considered that there's appropriate mitigation, and weighing up the balance of everything, that tree loss is acceptable given the benefits of new tree planting, which I appreciate are not the same from day one, obviously, in terms of the ecological benefit they bring, but looking at the benefits of an application as a whole. So that's part of the planning balance. In this instance, it was concluded that there's tree loss, there's not appropriate mitigation in terms of new tree planting, which isn't one for one. I think it was. I think it's a loss of 69 trees, of which 21 are Category B and 48 are Category C. And there is a planting of 121 replacement trees proposed, but the landscape officer doesn't consider that they are suitable mitigation because they're not in appropriate. They're not all in appropriate locations. So that's where the planning balance was weighed up in this instance. It could, in different scenarios on other applications or even on this site, you could have a different situation where there's tree loss but considered to be appropriate mitigation, but that's not the case before you tonight, in officer's opinion.
Just if I can just very quickly follow up on the affordable housing element side of it, and I appreciate what you've just said with regards to what policy and guidance are expected to sort of follow, but I think there's something wrong, frankly, there, in my view then, because if you have 171 proposed dwellings, which some are of a flatted element, etc., or whatever, however things do stack up, I can't understand how that can't be delivered viably, and if that is the case, every developer will be coming forward to us and shouting viability issues with regards to why they should not have to deliver affordable housing, and that's not acceptable. It's not you and the officers and the council and the others, but there needs to be a better control or proposals with regards to delivering affordable housing for residents living in West End, our key workers and everything else who are vital to our communities, to be able to work and live in the area that they work in, and having a purely market saleable element within this. I thought it was possibly a viability because it was tied to the other elements within the scheme, and if that's a mechanism to get out of delivering affordable homes, that should not be allowed in my view, and that should be a policy thing. And if you're saying that the housing still, even with the apartment block, stacks up, doesn't offer, from a viability perspective, affordable homes, then I think there's something wrong with national policy with regards to that, and that needs to be addressed.
Just to clarify one point, I can't categorically say it wouldn't be affordable because it was only their initial thoughts. That assessment hasn't been run, but obviously they're aware of the figures that have inputted into the wider assessment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kylre. Thank you, Liz. Any other questions from councillors regarding this application? Yes, Councillor Ian Corben.
Sorry. Thank you, Liz. It's a very clear report, and I thought your presentation earlier was excellent. I've got one question. We've all been to the Rose Bowl, the Hedge Bowl, the Utility Bowl over the years, and when we've come out onto Botley Road, there is clearly an issue. What we're now going to have is are people trying to get to and from their homes and a care home. So that's fundamentally different, and the concerns. And I just wondered, from a transport assessment point of view, I've read the report, but is there anything different being proposed? Because we all know that Botley Road is full of people walking, and to introduce cars into that and being allowed to drive along Botley Road, I just wonder if that been specifically referenced with Hampshire County Council and their conclusions, please.
The submission does include a proposed management plan for traffic on event days, and that does indicate that recognising that there would be conflict between vehicular movements and pedestrians, that there would be a need, as there is currently, for traffic to be held. So there would be certain times on event days when residents and visitors to the care home, but not emergency vehicles, and not emergency vehicles needing to access the residents either, residential development, where development would need to be held. And the management plan is saying it would be approximately 30 minutes. The County Council are aware of that. They asked for the management plan. They've asked for it from day one. I think it came in the December submission. Obviously, as mentioned, there have been a number of amendments, sort of 3 main tranches, versions of the scheme. They considered that. They consider it to be similar to what other residents, for example, on to the north, the new development, Miller's Walk, to the north of Botley Road, that they, and generally the approach taken to traffic on Botley Road. So they considered that that would be acceptable from a highways and access point of view. But yes, residents wouldn't have free-flowing access at all times to their properties.
As no other hands went up, can I just ask one other question about Telegraph Woods and the footpath? Is the footpath there at the moment? I've walked Telegraph Woods and I can picture it fairly clearly. Is this an upgrade to an existing footpath within Telegraph Woods? And what sort of seepage from the path? And I'm thinking here particularly on match days. Is it expected that people will be able to leave the bowl and walk out towards Telegraph Road that way? I'm just conscious that there are many stories of people leaving the match and using gardens as a toilet on their way home. That is not only disgusting, but I'm just wondering from a Telegraph Woods point of view, has that been looked at, and what can be done to stop that happening?
In terms of the route of the path, generally there is an informal trodden path. It's not formal, it's not surface in any particular manner. It sort of peters out a bit where you actually get to the edge of the development site or the proposed development site, but around the edge of the wood it's a more obvious path, and then it gets a bit more haphazard because of the nature of the slope, really. There is already a new access gate, pedestrian gate, that is in on Telegraph Road, so it's already a formalised access point in that sense, but the path is not a formalised path, so it would be an upgrading of that in terms of the surface, but then where it isn't an obvious route at the moment because of the levels, that's where it would need to be stepped. But that's also the part of the site where it's got the most impact on the grade A trees that the tree officer is most concerned about. Hampshire County Council, as Countryside Service Rights Away and the Rights Away team have indicated that they would want that route to be dedicated for public access at all times. And from a point of view of having it as an alternative access point for residents of the proposed dwellings, then it would be offered or should be there as a route that's available at all times. That would mean you couldn't then close it off at match times. Obviously, people can get through on match days that way if they wanted to. Obviously, it's not a formal entry in, but there aren't fences stopping that. There are numerous ways of sort of emerging from Telegraph Woods into the site should you choose to do that. You could potentially, there's reference to the need to, if permissions granted, to have a habitat management access plan for Telegraph Woods, and that would be to do with things like trying to guide people in particular directions so that the most sensitive areas are restricted. So that could be some sort of fencing or more sort of understory planting, something like that, to guide people in certain directions and to stop them veering off into all of the woods from that particular path. But if it's, I don't think there could be a way that the path could exist, but you could also close it off at certain times. As it says in the report, that the land in question is due to be transferred to the Borough Council. As it's not currently land that we own or lease, but Telegraph Woods is leased from the Oxford College. This bit of woodland was actually due to be transferred as part of the what was Dog Kennel Farm development site with the Telegraph Heights, so it's all coming over as part of that. So it would be land publicly accessible. So as a result, there is that potential conflict in that you can't have it open but then close it off at certain times. They're not proposing to put the roads up for adoption, so the roads and shared services, etc., within the site would be private, and so under that they could do their own management controls under that. But if the benefit of that path is to be realised, it would have to be publicly available, which then does cause that other issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, Councillor Pretty.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify, please? We refer to the non-viability of part of the site. Is it just the housing that's non-viable, or if we ask for affordable housing, is it just the housing that becomes non-viable, or does the whole project become non-viable?
The way it's been assessed to date, it's looked at everything as a complete measure, complete package, sorry, and that includes the costs and revenues from the individual development elements, but also any required Section 106 contributions. Then they've not been, given the nature of where we are with some of the scheme and issues not being fully completed, we haven't got a final figure, but the Section 106 contributions included in the financial viability appraisal are already up to 7 million. I did ask consultants, and they did say that they could, based on, these figures are obviously based on it being 100% market, which is what's been put in, they could increase by almost the same again before you would get to a nil profit perspective. So at the moment, the assessment is on the basis of everything all put in together. I don't have the individual breakdown for if you just looked at that. Obviously, the figures are there, but it's not how it's been presented. You could look at just the housing, and as I say, they have advised that their thoughts are that taking the standard methodology, that it wouldn't be considered to be a viable option, even just looking at the housing element. Obviously, the whole package of mitigation measures is includes 106 financial contributions for all sorts of other elements: education, health, transport, community facilities, public art, open space, etc. So obviously that package of mitigation measures is there as a whole. Members could look at it and consider that in this particular instance, affordable housing is more important than others. And then that could be something for negotiation to see how affordable housing could come out, but it would, to make that possible, you would be looking to change it, you would have to change some of the other mitigations. So that's where we are. It's the figures before us and the advice we've received is that taking it either way, it would be unviable when looking at the standard methodology for calculating that.
Very much, Councillor Pretty. Thank you, Liz. Any other questions from councillors? Yes, Councillor Gomer.
Thank you. Just to pick up on that last point, that I think it was 8.2% profit figure, does that include that full Section 106 that you just mentioned, excluding affordable housing?
It includes approximately 7 million, which doesn't include the highways figure, which could be another million or more on top, and it doesn't include some contributions that the rights-of-way, Hampshire County rights-of-way team would require in terms of, it does include the measure of some of them, because some of them they've managed to cost and others would need further work in order to cost them to do with surfacing and things. So it's partial rights-of-way contributions are included, but highways sustainable transport contribution isn't included. That's generally related to the cost of the works on Botley Road. So they would have to they could be provided under a Section 278, which would mean you wouldn't actually include it in the 106, but it would be a development cost. So we need to include it somehow in the viability calculations.
Great, thank you. And that leads on to my second question, which is around sort of trip generation and the impact on local highways. I think most people who live in West End are probably less concerned about the Botley Road, Marshall Drive junction and more concerned about the Brad Beers roundabout, which is where we seem to spend our time sat in traffic jams. Clearly some agreement. I wonder, I mean, I didn't read the whole traffic assessment because there was like half a gigabyte of it and about 6,000 pages as far as I can see. Can you give me a high-level summary of what other junctions were modelled and whether, for example, there would need to be contributions to those other junctions? Because the sort of, I guess, position I would open with is that there probably should be.
So initially, County Council didn't consider that there was enough assessment of the wider network. Then more assessment was done, and they have confirmed, and I did double check this with them when writing the report to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. They were generally happy with the trip levels that they said would be generated, and that's based on looking at trip generation from similar developments elsewhere in similar type of locations and access to highway infrastructure. And they said they only asked for Botley Road and Marshall Drive to be looked at in detail in terms of the capacity, because from their previous work undertaken within the vicinity of the site, there are some, and this is, I am reading from there, these are them, there are some known capacity issues already, but in terms of volumes of traffic, this development would have had on these junctions, it would have only been a small percentage impact. At other junctions, the impact from this development would have been smaller, so these were not considered. In either case, the sustainable mode contribution, which is generally the pedestrian and cycle improvements, would help mitigate this impact by encouraging the uptake of sustainable modes in the vicinity of the site, leading to a modal shift in the area.
And then in terms of that sort of sustainable mode support, what sort of measures would be viable on a site like this? It strikes me that it's quite far, for example, from a bus stop. Presumably no bus company would run a bus up there.
No, there's no proposal to bring a bus into the site, so it would be accessed via Botley Road for buses. In terms of the improvements, it is looking at on the northern side of, firstly starting at the southern side, because that's where the access comes out, then there would be a new crossing point, and then there would, to take you to the north and the existing, some of the existing pedestrian cycle infrastructure, but then improving that as it heads west to make for a more continuous run, including junctions, I don't know if you've seen them elsewhere, where effectively the giveaway line at the traffic is dropped further back for cars and vehicles, and pedestrians and cycles can continue across the junction and unimpeded. So it's looking at that and getting the connectivity to the existing infrastructure, which heads off to secondary school, but then also west towards the facilities in West End. That, together with the pedestrian route we've just been talking about around the edge of the woodland, Telegraph Woods, were the two sort of combined approaches where they consider that they would be appropriate and suitable improvements to sustainable travel in principle, but as you'll see from the report, they've still got some concerns about the exact nature of the proposals on Botley Road.
Great, thank you. And then one more, which is the it's the public open space that's also trying to be the ecological buffer, but can't really be both. How much of that sort of open space would likely need to be lost in order to provide sort of an appropriate buffer? If it does need to be lost, I don't know if there's anything else you would expect to do with it to let it do both.
That's one calculation I haven't done. So it would be, this area here, the public open space comes up to about here, and then I think the levels are such that it's not proposed to be included within the public open space. But then it's this area here which is included. So it would be looking to, sorry, I'll just have a look at the overall figure. Apologies. Right, so the area, so the public open space in total measures just under 10,000 square metres, and the area adjacent to the Stadium Road provides a continuous area of around 3,800 square metres. Within that would be the locally equipped area of play. So that being continuous, because that's a requirement. So that's sort of this area here, up to the road and then down. So that's about 3,000. What did I say? 3,800. But in total, this sort of area up here is included, and then the area down here. So it's it wouldn't be the 9,853 minus 3,800, but because there are other elements that would be included, mostly this area up here, but it would be a significant chunk.
Great, that's
Apologies
all for now.
for not having the
No, that's all right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. I have a question regarding the visitor experience at the utility bowl. In the first application, there showed a bridge going over the road which would separate pedestrians from traffic, and now all we see is something called a fan zone. Now you showed a picture and you said not necessarily the shop would be there, so just to show my ignorance, I'm not really sure. Could you tell me what a fan zone is, please? Thank you.
Generally, as proposed here, obviously a fan zone could be different things in different places, but here it's, as now proposed, it is a segregated pedestrian area, a minimum of 10 metres wide. It does vary, it's obviously wider at Botley Road and then comes a bit narrower, but minimum of 10 metres. You can see it this plan doesn't quite reach Botley Road, but you can just about see. So it's slightly wider here, and then it comes down here, and this is a minimum of 10 metres wide. It gets to here, and previously, yes, the ramp sort of curled around here and in, and actually into the stadium across the road. And the proposal now is to be segregated to here, but then from the roundabout round to, you can just about see where it changes, round to the west gate, it would be a shared surface. So that's one of the issues that the County Council have raised in terms of potential conflict with pedestrians. Obviously, if traffic is on non-event days, it could operate as a shared surface, and that would be fine. They're concerned that with the volume of pedestrians on an event day, that there could be too much conflict. So it's segregated here, segregated pedestrian zone here, so space for people to congregate and move around. And then here you would be walking around on shared surface. So basically, shared surfaces are generally where there isn't a defined pavement. So you'd be on a single level, cars and pedestrians, and then that would be taking you around to the west gate. So part segregated, that's really the fan zone area, and then this would be the continual route. But yes, you would come in via the existing access. There's no new access point.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Any other further questions from councillors before we move into debate? No? Okay then, now this is part of the agenda, as I mentioned, where we can't take any other comments from the floor. So, does any councillor wish to start the debate, please? Thank you. Councillor Kylre.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I've listened very carefully to all of the points raised by the speakers, members of the public, councillors' questions, obviously the ones I've raised myself. I had a significant number of points, many of which have been covered by the residents and also other councillor questions and concerns about this application as we see in front of us. I don't think deferral is a viable option in my view. I think that plenty of time has been given to this in its current form. However, I think there is a realisation, or it needs to be a realisation, that probably something will be seen on certain elements of this site in the future because it's an allocation in the local plan. However, what we're seeing in front of us this evening seems to me like a sort of game of Monopoly, really. You sort of put quite a lot of housing in there, and then we'll chuck a hotel in, and then there'll be a care home that will go in there as well, and we'll move certain elements around the site and hope that it all fits. Unfortunately, from my perspective, I don't think it does, not in the way it's being put forward to us this evening. I think some of the architectural issues, the second hotel, which I think actually detracts from the architectural presence of the Hilton Hotel, the way it's being proposed, I think that's really very awkward. Some of the street scenes, etc., in the housing elements, I think is also very awkward, seems to be ill thought through. The positioning again at the bottom of the site, as we see it here, of the care home, just seems very awkward, further away from any other part of West End, frankly, to be perfectly honest with you, which doesn't seem to sit very well from a care home perspective. If you want to isolate all your older generation, well, then that's fine, but I'm not sure that's really what we should be doing. But my real concerns, notwithstanding those, is some of the technical points with regards to things like filtration and suds and everything, which and the biodiversity impacts, the fact that the communal bin stores for the flatted elements are just left outside on the ends of the blocks proposed. That's just not good planning in my view, and really should have been able to be sorted out prior to it being presented to us this evening. And then we then get an off-the-cuff comment that, well, we'll just take the care home out. Well, that's not what's being proposed to us this evening, and that's not going to get it across the line from me, and actually that worries me very significantly, that we would be prepared to just remove a monopoly piece out of the application just so that you can see whether you can get it across the line. That's just not right. I think this needs to be completely looked at again. But I really do have significant concerns about the removal of the trees, because to create a fan zone, now where in the hierarchy of planning should we be valuing our environmental landscape around us that's been there for so long for a concrete created space that apparently that's what you do now, so therefore that's fine, we can just tear up our natural environment to put that in. I just don't think that's acceptable whatsoever. There is going to be clearly an environmental impact with regards to the loss of the trees. They do provide a significant function with regards to removal of pollutants and air quality, biodiversity value, and supporting nature in all of its hierarchies, as we've heard. I am concerned about the proposed pathway to Telegraph Woods and its impact potentially of not only increasing footfall through Telegraph Woods, which, you know, on balance could be a benefit, might not be a benefit, but you are then also again impacting onto our natural environment, and therefore wildlife responds to that, sometimes in a positive way, majority of the time in a negative way. We have to be very careful that in the context of this whole site, you have a hard stop with the motorway, and that means we're squeezing our natural flora and fauna and our wildlife into smaller and smaller spaces. And it's incredibly difficult for them to therefore, when you have these more isolated pockets because they're pushed there because of development, that actually they are finding it more and more difficult to thrive and to be able to sustain themselves. So for all of those reasons, and all the reasons obviously clearly outlined in the report, and I would like to pay tribute obviously to Liz and the team who've worked incredibly hard on this for a very long period of time, I just don't think that this stacks up at all, and therefore I'd be very happy to propose that we refuse this application as it stands before us this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kylre. Yes, I'd like, oh sorry, if I may, just before we start, I'd just like to say that I think it creates an isolated community there with where those houses are likely could be built. There's no sustainable transport, there's no proper access. Care homes there seems to be right out on a limb. This thing about holding traffic for half an hour to let people get in and out of their homes or the care home just seems absolutely ridiculous. It may be a novelty to start with, but eventually people will complain to the council and say, well, what are you going to do about it? So for me, it just doesn't sit very well. And the fact that it has been out, I think it's 3 consultations it's had, so it's had 3 bites of the cherry. So I would second Councillor Curl's proposal to refuse it, and thank you, and not to defer it. Thank you. Councillor Corben.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, this evening, I was just going to say a healthy debate with local residents is really important. So thank you, genuinely, because it helps get your point across, and that clearly applies to the applicants as well. So thank you for everybody that's come and spoken this evening. I've read the report. I've heard the points discussed. And I just wanted to comment on the applicant's comments specifically. This is a fantastic facility that we have here. It's one that has brought West End and Eastleigh profile on an international basis, and really we mustn't forget that. Part of that is the relationship between the bowl, whatever we're calling it, and the residents, and as I've said in the past with previous applications, that is really, really crucial, because we've all got to love the bowl, and it has got to remain successful. So I completely agree with Councillor Kylre. Something here may well be doable. It's in the local plan. It has an ability to have something granted, but I do agree, having said all of that, that this application isn't going to be the basis of it, and so I will be agreeing with Officer's recommendation for refusal. One of the main reasons is the affordable homes, and I do understand it, but that is really one of the issues. There are a number, and I'm not going to repeat them all because Rupert's already done that. So all of the above, but specifically how the bowl interacts with residents, how it interacts with trees. I'm sorry to say, because it does, and it is important. Rupert is absolutely right, from my point of view, that trees should be protected wherever possible. But also the wider ecology of the site. I am concerned about Telegraph Woods. I am concerned that neighbours have people urinating in their front gardens. That is not nice. That is not something, and I don't know that it happens elsewhere. I guess it does. I don't know. Perhaps I'm naive. But we are all neighbours of the bowl, and we've all been there, and we've all enjoyed our time there. I won't. So as fantastic as a facility is, I can't support the application tonight. I would just say to the Saints fan, actually, earlier, if he's still here, we do absolutely have 90-minute football matches. As Saints fans, before this season, we had days and days of misery after the 90 minutes, but this season we're doing better. But I am a cricket fan, I am a football fan, and the Rose Bowl does have a huge future here. But I'm not going to be able to support this application, and I will be agreeing with the refusal that officers have come with tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corben. Councillor House.
Thanks very much, Chair. I want to start with, well, first of all, actually, we've got to hope that Saints can keep this up for another 3 months. They're not there yet, but, you know, we will see. I mean, like others, I want to start with a few thanks. And firstly, to Liz Harrison, I think that's probably the best planning presentation I've ever heard in 29, 30 years on this council. I thought it was really, really good. It was long, it was detailed, but it had to be, but it was also succinct at the same time. And that takes a lot of doing, so thank you, Liz. That really is appreciated. Secondly, as Ian said, actually, I want to thank the members of the public for showing up. We don't often get that many people here. I wish we did, actually, more often, even if it's only on someone's garage extension or something as deeply sexy as that, but we don't, and so it's good to have people here. And I know it's actually quite a warm evening. So it's not as if you haven't had to turn your heating down or something. But so thanks very much for coming along. It really is good. And I'm going to stray into the area of being slightly less popular, probably with some residents, by thanking Rod as well. It's not easy. I mean, people here, 99% are against his application. And it's not easy for an applicant to show up and be the only person speaking in favour. Well, I think we all need to recognise that Rod and his team have spent the last couple of decades saving the venue, making it one of the best cricket venues in the world, and generating a lot of jobs and a lot of wealth for local people, and a lot of enjoyment too along the way. And yes, of course there are problems with traffic, and yes, of course there are all sorts of other problems. But I think the relationship that the ground have had with this council and with Hampshire and with West End Parish Council and with loads of other local organisations has genuinely been more better than bad. It's been pretty good most of the time, and we just need to recognise that along the way. And we as a local planning authority do also have a job to try and help make sure this venue stays viable for the future. Because whatever people might think about an application for 172 homes on this site, if the venue were to fail, there was then an application for 2,000 houses on the whole site. I suspect there'd be rather more people here than there are this evening. So that's a bit of context that I think is important to acknowledge, and I think that's also why the policy in the local plan, WE4, is there. And this was mentioned, it was mentioned by Liz Jarvis actually, that this was one of the last policies agreed in the local plan, along with one in Hamble, at the planning inspector's request, and it went backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, because the applicant, the venue, needed to make sure they had policies in the plan that would protect them for the future. And equally, the council, on the other side, needed to make sure they had the right environmental protections for the future as well. And so what was here in WE4 was the compromise that the planning inspector on behalf of the government was prepared to live with. So it wasn't perfect, but it was the best that was available to meet those competing needs. And so yes, it does include housing on the western side of the site, pretty well roughly as the plan shows. And if this was just an application for housing, and if it ticked a lot of the other boxes that were in the local plan, then I suspect the recommendation would have been in favour this evening rather than against. But no, it's important the residents understand this, Chair. The local plan allocates that part of the site for housing development. That's a fact. It's a government-approved plan. It's not just easily council, it's not just the applicant. It's a legally binding national document that allocates that part of the site for housing development. And you can put as many placards up as you like, but the reality is the reality. And so we need to think about that in terms of going forward, what comes next. I'll come back to WE4 a bit more in a minute if I can, but I do want to pick up three of the points that were raised from the floor, because again, it's important people understand that our job as a planning committee is to deal with a planning application. It's not to take an emotional decision. We were asked by several people, would we want to live there? Irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. The site is allocated for housing development on the western side, so whether we would like to live there is utterly irrelevant. It's up to an applicant to take a commercial risk and put forward a planning application and then sell or let homes as they wish, and it's their risk, not mine, not yours. The second is, do we need another hotel? Again, much the same issue applies. If it meets the local plan test of being ancillary to the sporting use of the site, then it ticks that box. It's not a question whether we want a hotel or not, it's a question whether the local plan permits it or not. And the local plan in principle does permit it. And the same issue applies in theory at least to the care home, but not in the location that's been proposed by the applicant. If the care home had been in the location where some of the residential properties were, then it could be argued that it was residential use in that site and would be in conformity with the plan. It isn't, and that's why our planning team recommended the removal or the refusal of the care home in that location for good reasons. And whilst you might take the view that a resident or a potential resident could take an objective choice to live in homes to the west of the bowl and risk the noise of cricket ground, cricket matches and other activities and the occasional Arctic Monkeys gig, the care home residents might not have that choice because they might be put there with dementia, not at their own choice. So I don't think this is a good location I don't think that is a good location for the care home, and I'm pleased that on behalf of the team, Rod said they prepared to remove that from the application as time goes by. Chair, I can't hear myself speak at the moment because of the interruptions.
Excuse me, can I ask you please to keep quiet? Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, with that, and those are legitimate planning issues, and it is important that people understand them. Let's think about the bits that are here, because a lot of this application does meet the local plan requirements. And again, it's not popular to say that, but the reality it does. The walkway ticks the box, probably. The hotel ticks the box, probably, if the design was improved. The pavilion ticks the box, arguably. It actually could actually give a better visual aspect to what's there at the moment. The care home doesn't, as we've agreed. The wellbeing centre probably does meet the local plan requirements. The residential, in theory, does, but in practice it doesn't. And it doesn't for the design reasons that have been outlined, some of the environmental issues that have been outlined, and also because it doesn't provide affordable housing. And that brings me to the policy WE4 and understanding what WE4 was there for. It was there to try to facilitate some additional development to improve the viability and overall sports provision on the site. It wasn't designed to be taken in isolation, and the working assumption when the local plan was agreed was that other local plan policies would come into effect alongside WE4. In other words, there would be affordable housing on what is essentially a greenfield site on the western side of the ground. Not strictly totally a greenfield site, because there's some rubble there, because there's been informal parking there over the years, but it's essentially a greenfield site. And that brings me to my major problem with the viability assessment, which does look at the site as a whole, with a few exceptions, as opposed to looking at the housing issues, which by themselves, on what is essentially a greenfield site, ought to deliver a viable scheme. And if it doesn't, something's rather wrong with the scheme. Now, we have other sites around the borough, including, frankly, borough council promoted sites that have had viability challenges attached to them. On borough council owned sites, we've got the benefit that we are the applicant as well, which means we can guarantee through other mechanisms that we can deliver the affordable housing. That isn't true with a third-party application. We can only guarantee securing affordable housing through the Section 106 agreement, and it should be there. To me, it's always been a red line on this site that it must achieve affordable housing as part of the residential scheme. It's still a red line as far as I'm concerned, and I'll come back to this in a second, Chair, but I think we should strengthen the recommendation on refusal on the affordable housing point. The second point that I've got concerns over relates to the housing aspect, and it was touched on by previous speakers, which is around the access arrangements. WE4 says, and I'll quote it, "Any residential development is located solely in the northwest corner of the site, and the development provides an appropriately designed access directly to from the settlement of West End, rather than via Marshall Drive, for pedestrians and cyclists, and also, unless demonstrated otherwise, for vehicles. And the layout and design of the development ensures an appropriate level of residential amenity in respect to the cricket ground and events venue." That last bit probably has been ticked, but the point about the access issue for pedestrians and cyclists, and also unless demonstrated otherwise for vehicles, hasn't been. And it's touched on in the reasons for refusal, but I think we just need to think about, maybe we can delegate this outside this meeting, whether we should be toughening up the recommendation on that point. All sorts of people have raised during the debate from the floor, from residents, and also councillors this evening, that I think we're concerned that this isn't an isolated community. That was always one of the key issues about allocating this site for residential development, that it was part of West End, not a remote detached development that could only be accessed by Marshall Drive, particularly when there are cricket matches or Arctic Monkeys gigs on. So it's not there yet. It's not there by quite some way. Those are the main points that I wanted to raise, Chair. I think others have done more than enough justice to many other points. So I would recommend that we, hopefully, Councillor Kylre and yourself would take as an amendment, or take on board, that we delete the phrase review mechanism from refusal 14. And that would put the affordable housing issue firmly on the table in the event of an appeal. Because I think it is something we seriously want to test. This site, if it has housing on it, should have affordable housing. I'd hope at the same time we could also just recheck the issues around viability on the housing element alone of the site, and see what that brings us to, because I don't think that loading other points of the package in are appropriate. So for all those reasons, I'll be backing refusal this evening, because I think it is right that we take a decision now. This application has been on the table long enough. And whilst I understand the points that the applicant has made about wanting a deferral, to me, there comes a point where you have to take a decision, and I think that's now.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Councillor Kylre, are you happy with that then?
Yeah, I'm very happy to take that on board as part of the proposal to refuse, and specifically the issues around viability as raised by Councillor House, because I do think this absolutely needs to be the red line element within any residential proposal for this site going forward.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Du-Crow, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. The development as proposed this evening, I believe, is all take and no give, very little give. The financial viability has shown that apparently that we can't have any affordable homes. Councillor House has pointed out quite correctly, and I agree with him. There should be no development here without any affordable homes. Telegraph Woods is a particular interest of mine, as I run a nature recovery group there, and this woodland hasn't had much maintenance over many years, and it is really teetering on the edge of being healthy. This would be, I think, a nail in its coffin with the extra use that the woodland would get from dog walking, etc., recreational use. Also, I'm very concerned about Telegraph Woods is a jewel in the crown for West End people. It's a beautiful walk. I walk there most days myself, and when you walk along the lower path where this development would be, if you look out, you can see for miles and miles. You see blue sky, you can see birds of prey. There's areas of grassland which are described as just tarmac car park, but they're not. There's quite a lot of tall grass, wildflowers in the summer. What will be replaced will be the view of slab-sided houses all the way along this path. That will be taken away forever. Those views will be taken away forever from people, and we're constantly told that getting into nature, going for a walk, is so good for our mental health, and I feel it is. When you're in Telegraph Woods, you are in nature, and you could be in the middle of the countryside. To take that away from people for the next, well, forever, I think is despicable. Another issue, the traffic. According to the Hampshire assessment, most of the extra traffic would be mitigated by cycle lanes and footpath improvements. Now, I don't know about a fan zone, but I think maybe a reality zone would be, probably we should build one of those, because I really do like cycle lanes. I think they do attract more people on bikes, and that's a good thing, and I'd always want cycle lanes added. But to pretend that they're going to mitigate all the traffic from all these houses is just, I just find it, well, you see what I find. The final point, I say, it's not a material matter, but I noticed the Care Board comment on the surgeries. They requested some money for possible future spending on the surgeries, extensions, etc. But they commented that the 3 surgeries that take the people from this area are running at 162% of capacity. And they want to then throw another 400 patients onto their list, and they're happy to do that because they have to, I guess. But my worry is that if you're a doctor working at 162% capacity, a GP, and someone throws another 400 patients, Is that the straw that breaks the camel's back? Is that another doctor off to Australia? That would be my worry. Although it isn't a planning matter, I appreciate that, but it is a material matter for people, but maybe not for planning. I can't support this scheme, and I would not support an extension either to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Du-Crow. Councillor Asman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to be very brief. I've listened to the report this evening from the officer. I've taken account of the objectors and the people that were for the application. And on balance, there is no way I can agree this proposal. What I would say is I just think, for all the reasons, one of the most important things, and it's an emotional thing, and I know you've all been speaking with emotion from your hearts today, but I think one of the speakers actually summed it up. We who live in West End call it West End Village. West End Village is where we live, and West End is our home, and we want the best for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Asman. Any other councillor? Yes, Councillor Gomer.
Thank you, Chair. I support what everyone else has said. I don't support this application. I'm minded that it should be refused and not deferred. I'll set out a few other thoughts. I'll probably upset everyone in a second as well. Not everything in this application is objectionable, certainly not in planning terms. There are some positives, and I'm going to start with the unpopular one. Housing delivery is, in the rounds, a positive thing. There is a debilitating shortage of homes in the UK, and that fundamentally is what underlies the staggering rise in prices and the subsequent unaffordability of homes. I think if you spoke to anyone my age or below, that is a really key issue for them. And I think those people, when we refuse planning applications that includes housing, deserve to have that need recognised, and they deserve an explanation as to why we think in some places housing should be refused, because some of them are going to quite rightly ask why. And we need to be honest, as Cllr House says, that national planning policy and the local plans approved by the government do point towards the acceptability of some housing delivery on this site, whether or not we support that or not. Councillor Du-Crow is completely right to ask about, these concerns about additional residents and the impact that has on services. Also quite right to say that they are only sort of partially a planning concern. Hopefully, this is a temporary problem with GPs. Hopefully, the next government, whoever that is, I know I don't want it to be, we'll get on top of that and we'll sort this out, and then we can all get on with homes that hopefully will last hundreds of years more, and we can all forget these sad times where we can't actually get medical care. So homes positive in the round, but clearly, as they exist in this application, not enough to allow us to accept the proposal. The pavilion looks like a positive addition to the Ageas Bowl. It looks like it would really enhance the venue. So it's sort of sad to hear that it's actually not likely to be delivered initially, and seems to me to undermine sort of the benefits to the venue itself. So clearly, on balance, my concerns outweigh the positive impacts here. I'll go through a few of them. Many of them have already been touched on. Noise from events that will impact residents, as we've heard. Some of those residential properties are clearly too close to the stadium, notably the care home, clearly closer than is envisaged by policy WE4, and actually that brings them into conflicts with that existing business. WE4 1 Part D4 says that development should not compromise the function of the Ageas Bowl as an international cricket ground and events location. Clearly the location of that care home does, and possibly the location of some of those apartments as well. There are some wider points of residential amenity, lack of access to services, lack of access to sustainable transport. As Councillors Cllr and Garton and others have said, this development will be remote if it were permitted, and I can't see that actually these access proposals are amenable to walking down to Asda or using the services on the high street. And as Councillor House says, that WE4 requirement for access that's not via Marshall Drive doesn't seem to have been fully met. I think one thing that hasn't actually been mentioned very much is event day access. I think those of us who live in West End recognise the existing travel plans, the existing event day coning doesn't really work. And I think to put homes inside the venue and say, well, we have a travel management plan, I just can't see it working on the basis of what we've seen. We know that the residents who live opposite can't get in and out of their homes. We know people right down Botley Road can't get in and out of their homes. And those of us who live farther away often can't get in and out of our driveways either. So the idea that they could manage access to those homes on that access that's proposed just isn't adding up for me. Another point that is mentioned, we haven't really touched on in debate, is the settlement gap. That gap between West End and Hedge End is important, right? We're separate places. Hedge End is Hedge End, and West End is better and is West End.
You wish.
I agree with the report that the car park and the access will undermine that gap. I also think, by virtue of how poorly integrated that hotel is with the existing hotel, will undermine that gap as well, and I'll just explain why. I think the key view for me actually is one that no one's mentioned. It's that view as you come over the motorway bridge and you look left, assuming you're not the one driving, and you can see right across the Aegeus Bowl and the site, you can see the hotel, you can see it set in front of Telegraph Woods in this sort of green bowl of countryside. I think plonking a sort of hotel that doesn't respond to what's there existing, what's there already, actually really undermines that. It makes it feel like a conurbation rather than a well-designed piece of architecture within that countryside setting. So I think that impact on the countryside and the settlement gap is unacceptable. And then I suppose finally, I want to come back to WE4, it's what we've been talking about all evening. WE4 opens with this sentence that says, development will be supported where it facilitates the site's important role in meeting sporting needs in the borough and wider area. From what I can see of these plans as they stand at the moment, there's actually a real sort of paucity of support in there for sporting needs, particularly when we consider that some things like the pavilion may not actually be delivered initially, if ever. The pavilion itself clearly doesn't need houses to work in planning or spatial terms, and it seems to me that financially the link between that is quite tenuous. So I'm really not sold that this actually does its job, as set out in WE4, of really supporting the Aegeus Bowl as a sporting venue. So the applicants asked for a deferral, and I think we should consider why we're not happy to support that. I suppose bluntly for me it comes down to the fact that I don't think all of these issues can be dealt with in 2 months. I don't think they can all be dealt with through the removal of the care home. And essentially I don't see a point in deferring this. I think it either goes to go back to square one or it needs to go away.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. Councillor Kinloch?
Thank you. Councillor Gomer nicked half of my thunder of the bits and pieces that I was going to add to it. I love the Rose Bowl. I've been watching cricket there over the many years. I have run past this cricket ground and I have made it from Moor Green to the Bradbeers roundabout quicker than people driving. And if anybody's seen me run, they know that that is not a quick feat. Now, in part of this is, in the inclusion of the fan zone and the car park and things, is to separate pedestrians from traffic. Having an entrance over Botley Road actually increases the amount of traffic doing, sort of a pedestrian traffic conflict. Having a shared pedestrian access or shared vehicular pedestrian access for the residents and things up there, and the people going to the care home, people accessing some of the facilities at the back, that increases conflict. I think it is massively impactful on Telegraph Woods, as has already been discussed. The biodiversity problems that we've already got, the light pollution, the noise pollution, the urine pollution that's potentially been suggested. And I think we forget how much of an impact that a potential footpath through Telegraph Woods will actually have on the residents neighbouring the facilities, in terms of people are going to park more there than they do already, and things, and accessing bits of the woods that you wouldn't normally be able to access. And when we talk about closing a road for half an hour at the end of a game as they're kicking out, as we've already known, cricket matches can change when they finish. What happens if that half an hour is at the school run time? You had no plan of it, you had no recollection of it, and if the school's facilities locally, which we know are already oversubscribed, and you're having to travel to take your child to primary school or to secondary school, and you just happen to have missed that opportunity to go and get your children from school, and then you have to leave them at school for half an hour. I think that's something that's not been considered in the management plan. I catch the bus to the Rose Bowl when I go and watch cricket. I catch it from Hedge End Station. I walk to Hedge End Station and catch the bus. And I think there's been no sort of realisation about how important that is actually reducing traffic movements that has been there and how successful that has been, because I think it's been welcomed. But I think this has now sort of disappeared of where all the buses used to park. And I am concerned that this is an isolated community. And I am sad that it's been raised that the poor access to GP facilities, which is a chronic problem and is only going to get worse before it ever gets better, if it gets better. And I think I need to defend one of my other councillors. There was a lot of things about people residents in care homes having a choice. A lot of residents in care homes have dementia, have cognitive impairment, and don't get placed into nursing homes through their choice. Having large amounts of noise that can be disorientating and confusing to them is not right. So although, yes, you do have choice, actually, there are a lot of elderly, mentally infirm people with cognitive impairment that don't. And I think a care home placed this close to a facility that produces noise is meant to produce noise in terms of cricket fans, in terms of music events. I think this is not the place to have one. So everybody has said everything else that I would have liked to say, but I will support refusing this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch. Any other councillor wishes to speak? Okay, in that case, I'm going to go back to Liz, because Liz, we need to add some more things in, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So just wanted to clarify the proposed amendments put forward by members. So as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, with regard to proposed reason for refusal 14, it is as amended in the update sheet and in the presentation tonight, but then with a further amendment to remove the words review mechanism after affordable housing. So affordable housing is there as a generality. And then I believe the other suggestion that was supported by Councillor Kylre to modify his proposal was a reason for refusal in relation to the pedestrian and alternative pedestrian and cycle access. So that could be included as an additional reason for refusal in terms of the requirements of policy WE4. Obviously, as proposed, it isn't suitable for cyclists because it involves steps, and it's not an access for all, which would be difficult given the terrain, but in the location proposed. But I think that was the way the discussion had gone. I wasn't sure about the vehicular point, because just on that, the county council had said, subject to if they they could sort out the outstanding issues they've got with regard to sustainable modes of transport, which would mean that the Botley Road and Marshall Road Junction was then acceptable to them, that they didn't consider that an alternative vehicular access was required. So I just wanted clarification on whether it was the pedestrian cycle point, which is one bit of the policy, and or the vehicular bit.
Councillor House.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I specifically raised this as well, and I think Richard Gomer did later too. Certainly the pedestrian cycle bit is an explicit requirement in WE4, so that's a must-be extra line. And unless the wording that's already there is strong enough, I think it would be better if it was a separate reason, because it's mentioned in our refusal for ground 14 in passing, but it's not there specifically. So I think it would be stronger if it was there.
It's not there specifically.
No,
so
I
we
think it would be helpful if it was there specifically, given there is an explicit requirement in WE4 to make that test. I'm not convinced with the County Council position on the vehicular access at the moment, for all the reasons that have been explained during the course of this evening, both from members of the public and from councillors, that the vehicular access, given the closures, are actually adequate enough. Now, there might be other mechanisms that could be achieved, like giving everyone the right to use the extra route through Uplands and Moorhill Road, but that's not what's on the table at the moment, and that would require, I think, a fairly major change to the arrangement of that escape route, along with closing the golf course for those periods, and that doesn't feel like it's viable. So I think we should be testing that further, and if that means it's an additional reason for refusal, so be it. If we're comfortable it's not, then fine, but from everything we've heard, it feels like it ought to be.
I think we could put some wording, because you make that reference to the closure. I think that's a different point from a sort of highway safety perspective, per se, in terms of traffic generation. So I think we could, I wouldn't want to give you the exact wording now. So if you were content to change your vote to allow us to delegate us the opportunity to sort out the wording in conjunction with the chair and vice chair, or whoever you choose members-wise, then we can look at that wording and confirm that.
Joe, I'm certainly happy with that if the mover and you as seconder were to. I also made the separate point around the viability assessment, testing it. That's probably not a reason for refusal, but it's background work in the background. We just need to be confident we've got our ducks in the row, given that it's a very clear, strong desire from members of the committee that we expect affordable housing to be delivered.
Sorry, can I just clarify? So that's not part of the delegation back?
No, it is part of the delegation back, because clearly we don't want to come back here again. These residents want to stay at home and watch Gladiators or something. That would be 2 decades ago, never mind. Don't watch TV. So we don't want it to come back, I'm sure, but I think that there's a piece of work to be done there as part of the council's case and understanding the council's case. It probably isn't a reason for refusal as written in, because we've already made the point about affordable housing in refusal grounds 14.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think we're all clear on that now. I know, Councillor Kylre, you're happy to propose that with the amendments that have been included?
Yes, very much so, as long as the substantive is that it is refusal, and then obviously the other elements are then agreed as part of the overall refusal, that it isn't something that is left, if you like, until such time as the wording is agreed. You know, it is so that we can give clarity to the residents here that it is definitely, you know, as long as it's voted for, obviously, that the proposal is that it is refused as it stands at the moment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Kylre. So I know I seconded. Does anyone else want to second it with all those amendments and changes, please? Yes? Councillor Corben, thank you very much. Right, before we go to the vote, I just want to thank once again everyone that's come along this evening. It's been really good to see you all. And I will now ask councillors whether you agree with the recommendation to refuse this application. Would you please show of hands? Thank you. Well, I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Once again, thank you all the people that have come along to speak. The Rose Bowl, the GS Bowl, Utility Bowl, whatever you say, is a wonderful facility, and I know that we've all enjoyed it. Right, if I'd just like to say then, our next meeting is next Monday, the 5th of February, at 7 o'clock here at the wonderful Bury Theatre, and everyone is welcome to come along. May I just thank our officers who have obviously been working all day. It's been a very long day, all their input that they've had, and to councillors and the public. Thank you very much indeed, and I wish you a good night.